Of America's most intensely regional sport may be spoken in the soft drawl of South Georgia, or the nasal twang of Western North Carolina, or the backwater brogue of South Carolina. But wherever you place the accent, you must place it below the Mason-Dixon line. In its entire racing schedule, stock car racing ventures out of the Southeast to visit only 4 locations. But those are just vacation trips. Stock car racing makes its home in the South because it was born there nearly 40 years ago. And even before there were races, there were races. Legend has it that men like Junior Johnson and Buck Baker made money driving false-bottom cars filled with moonshine whiskey on dark backwoods roads in the mountains of North Carolina and Tennessee. When they emerged onto dirt tracks to race with Lee Petty and Fireball Roberts, they were participating in the development of what now ranks as one of the region's 3 major sports. Only college football, mostly south and west of the Georgia line, and college basketball, mostly north and east of the Peach State, have provided real competition. Pro football, regarded by some as the nation's favorite sport, is no match for stock car racing in the marketplace. As Atlanta proved on November 3 of last year, the Falcons and the Redskins drew a crowd of about 40,000. A few miles away, nearly 70,000 bought tickets to see the Atlanta Journal 500. It isn't just the dangers, though certainly that's part of the appeal. It's that Southerners are uniquely attractive to heated competition among men who are among the coolest customers in sport. And as long as that's the case, sports like baseball and football will be the meat and potatoes of the American spectator's buffet. But stock car racing, by tradition and by choice, is the grip. ABC Sports presents from the Atlanta International Raceway, just south of the big city, one of the premier stock car racing events of the year, the Atlanta 500. This ABC Sports exclusive is being brought to you by Radio Shack, the computer experts, by Chevrolet, who invite you to drive today's Chevy, live today's Chevy, and by Goodyear. You either have Goodyear Eagles or you need them. This is the Atlanta International Raceway, actually located some 20-odd miles south in Hampton, Georgia, where today the commercial and cultural capital of the New South makes one of its 2 superspeedway appearances of the year-long stock car racing schedule. The Atlanta 500 follows by exactly 1 month the Daytona 500, the race which set the tone for a season which is so far extremely unpredictable. And this race could offer some definition to the picture of a big money sport where a lot seems to be up for grabs right now. Today, prize money of almost $500,000 available to the 42 drivers who will start this 328-lap 500-mile race. It rained for much of the latter part of this week, knocking out a lot of practice time, but today there is only a 30% chance of rain. Hello, I'm Jim Lampley. For the next 4.5 hours, the Atlanta 500 will be coming to you live via ABC Sports. You've probably noticed that the cars have just begun their pace laps on the track. This is a race which should materially advance 2 ongoing stories in the sport. Number 1, the effort of Bill Elliott, 30-year-old driver from nearby Dawsonville, Georgia, to live up to the incredible expectations he created with his dominant performance a year ago, particularly early in the 1985 season. 2, the resurgence of General Motors cars, which made significant design changes to get back into the race with Bill Elliott's Ford. And here to call the race with me is our motor racing expert, Sam Posey. Sam, we start to look for competitive edges here at Atlanta. I think you have to start with the design and configuration of the track.
Yeah, which is unusual in that it has such long turns. Any driver who's ever driven this place will tell you that when you get into the turns, they seem to go on and on, almost forever. Then you get a tiny little burst on the straightaway, and you're back into another turn. So even though the lap speed here is only about 170 miles an hour, which is much less than the 205-mile-an-hour speeds at Daytona, say, this is known as a driver's track and a real challenge. Now, you know, you spoke a moment ago, the rules changes over the winter, which allowed the General Motors bodied cars to improve their aerodynamics for this season. And frankly, if qualifying here is any indication of the results, the first 4 rows, the first 4 cars, the fastest cars, are General Motors cars. It looks to me as if Ford's salad days may very well be over. It's hard to pick a favorite in a race which is going to run 500 miles because the odds against any single individual are so great. But if you would pick one of those General Motors people, Dale Earnhardt. He has the pole here. He almost won Daytona a month ago. He was within an ace of getting it to happen when he ran out of gas, and he's won this race twice before. So he is a heavy favorite in my mind.
All right, Sam, let's look quickly at the grid. You mentioned Earnhardt on the pole, recently disciplined by NASCAR for having judged to have forced a decisive crash toward the end of a race in Richmond with Darrell Waltrip. Next to him on the outside of row 1, Tim Richmond, second race in a row, a big early qualifying effort, and then bumped from the pole. On the inside of row 2, Morgan Shepherd in a car overseen by a master wrench named Jake Elder. Outside of him, number 10, Greg Sachs, winner of the Firecracker 400 in Daytona last July. Row 3, Bill Elliott on the inside, superspeedway records in every category a year ago. Outside, the KG veteran Cale Yarborough likes this track. His handling skills could be a decisive advantage here today. Row 4, Rusty Wallace on the inside from the newest generation of stock car contenders. Outside of him, Jeff Bodine, both General Motors cars, and Bodine the winner a month ago, of course, of the Daytona 500, the first big race of this 1986 season. Row 5, Sterling Marlin on the inside says his car ran faster than Earnhardt's in testing a week ago. And outside of him, Harry Gant in a good ride furnished by Hollywood residents Burt Reynolds and Hal Needham. Row 6, Richard Petty, the king, is winless since July 4, 1984 in Daytona Beach. And outside of him, Terry Labonte won the most recent race on the circuit, a 500-miler in Rockingham, North Carolina, on March 2. Rows 7 through 9, 4 of the greatest names in the sport are there. Buddy Baker, Darrell Waltrip, Benny Parsons, Bobby Allison. Rows 10 through 12, Neil Bonnet on the inside of 10 could make it to the lead from there. A.J. Foyt won this race in 1971. Rows 13 through 15, inside row 13, Ron Bouchard is a coming talent. Pancho Carter on row 15, same man who sat on the pole at the Indy 500 last May. 16 through 18, Darrell Waltrip's brother Michael heads up row 16 on the inside, and rows 19 through 21, you see Kyle Petty, another stock car prince, got his long-awaited first win a few weeks ago at Richmond, but qualified number 38 here. And now they're getting very close to race time, Sam Posey, as we see them creeping around in formation on this last pace lap.
Jim, you see them as they come out of turn 2, going down that extremely short backstretch that I mentioned. In fact, the track doesn't even really flatten out there. It still stays a little bit banked. The bank's here 24 degrees. They're headed into the third turn now, just about half a mile ahead of them before this is the start begins. This is our camera car inside, it's called the race cam, inside the car of Cale Yarborough, and that is the view that he sees out of his car. He looks back and he sees Jeff Bodine, who also has one of our race cams in his car. He is looking forward and sees Cale in that car on the upper right of your screen. So obviously we're looking forward to the images that we'll get from there. They're coming to take the start, Jim, at about 70 miles an hour. That's the pace that they set here coming down to the start.
Okay, so our two race cams, as you saw, in the car of Cale Yarborough and Jeff Bodine. And now they take the green flag to begin the first lap of this 500-mile race, and going to the lead on the outside of row number 1 for the moment is Tim Richmond, now surrendering it temporarily to the man on the inside, number 3, Dale Earnhardt. They go down the back stretch the first time by the back grandstand. It is Richmond still with about a half-car length lead, and now there goes Earnhardt on the inside of him. Dale Earnhardt has been the center of controversy in stock car racing circles in recent weeks. There is nothing that the man from Kannapolis, North Carolina would like better than to win here today. And as they finish the first lap, Earnhardt has taken a healthy lead as he begins to pull away. Clearly, Sam Posey, the quickest car in qualifying and in trials here a week ago when many of the drivers were here to test, although there are a couple of drivers who say that they think they can keep up with Earnhardt.
Exactly so, and one of those is sitting right now in second place, Morgan Shepherd, in the car right behind Dale Earnhardt. You see him there, number 47, that's Morgan Shepherd, and a great start by Bill Elliott, who you see coming into the picture now in third. Bill Elliott, who won both of the races held here last year, and who has not been able to win so far this year in 4 races, is showing more speed, Jim, than he has showed at any time so far this year.
They go down the back stretch again, and the leader remains Earnhardt. Morgan Shepherd there, also in the yellow and white car. The red number 9, that is Bill Elliott in third place. Those 3 cars pulling just a little bit ahead of the rest of the field. Tim Richmond, who was starting on the outside of row number 1, has now dropped back into 4th place. And here they come down the front straight to pass the front grandstand one more time.
Earnhardt's superiority derives from having a car that seems to handle better very low around the racetrack. In other words, he's able to keep it what they call pinched down, very low. He takes literally a little bit shorter route around the track, and it's been very, very effective for him. It's as if their chassis has been set up all year. Despite all the changes that go on from race to race, their chassis has seemed to have an edge at each track. There, of course, is Cale Yarborough running right behind Greg Sachs. A little bit back in the pack, you see the race cam, and Greg Sachs right ahead of him there. Sachs, who won the Firecracker 400 last year in Daytona, the race that we were at.
Yarborough at this moment is running in 6th place. If you take a look at Cale at the office inside the roll cage, which constitutes the support system in his car, number 28. That is Sachs just in front of him, and there the 4 leaders farther up through his windshield. You can see Richmond and the 3 men in front of him, Elliott, Shepard, and the leader Dale Earnhardt. Now there goes Cale Yarborough on the inside, apparently making a move for the moment past Greg Sachs, and then letting Sachs go back by on the outside of the track.
Well, yes, but Cale, this is going into turn 1, and he's positioned where he wants to be, and you saw Sachs suddenly fade back out of the picture. In fact, Sachs, by being forced to go so wide, left a gap that another car drove right into. So that worked out very, very well for Cale Yarborough.
We are on lap 5 of 328 laps in this 500-mile race, the Atlanta 500. Dale Earnhardt is the leader, well ahead for the moment of Morgan Shepard at this early juncture in the race. 3rd place belongs to Bill Elliott. Tim Richmond still holding on to 4th place. Dale Earnhardt, 33 years old, from Kannapolis, North Carolina, had his best year perhaps in 1984 with 14 top 10 finishes, but he won this race back in 1980, the year in which he won the points championship for Grand National Stock Car Racing. Relatively brief career, he is already 6th on the all-time earnings list, and he is known as a Charger.
He's also known as an extremely tough man.
Dale Earnhardt, the leader for now, and we'll be back right after this. We are back at the Atlanta International Raceway, where, as you can see by the lap statistics, we are just getting started in a long haul. Dale Earnhardt still the leader, and the standings remain pretty much as they were when we went away. There is a look at the lead car, Earnhardt, who is building just a little bit of a working margin right now as you watch him go down the backstretch and into turn number 3. Shepard is on the right side of the screen, trailed by Bill Elliott.
Elliott, as I said, is having his best performance so far of the year. Encouraging for him, this is what you would call a home track. You see Elliott just on the right of your screen now, car number 9. He lives a little way up the road in a small town called Dawsonville, Georgia, and you can be sure that there are a number of people, probably in the hundreds here, rooting for him. Right on the tail of Morgan Shepard there.
There is much to prove for Bill Elliott, who was so dominant a year ago. 11 pole positions in superspeedway races, 11 superspeedway wins, tying a record. Particularly in the early part of the season, he was totally dominant. Everybody looks at the front of the pack in a race like this, but there is a continuing story going on at the back of the pack. That is the car, number 18, Tommy Ellis, who qualified 17th originally for this race Friday, but then when later found by NASCAR to have had an inoperative fan and alternator on his car, something which boosts the horsepower, was busted back in effect to 42nd position and forced to start at the very end of the field today. Already, Sam Posey, he has passed 14 cars in the race, and here's a look at how Tommy Ellis has been going through traffic.
This is just before the start, I believe, Jim, and as you see, he's already positioning himself to take probably a higher line than the other cars are going to. You'll find more running room up there where the slower cars that he's passing will not be able to operate as successfully as he. He's already by 4 cars right there at the start. In many ways, you know, it's a delight, frankly, to start at the back because you get to knock off so many people right away that you may overcome the disadvantage of the tactical bad position by feeling racy. Look at the drivers he'll be able to quickly overwhelm as he moves his way up through the pack. It's kind of fun when you're forced into that situation.
Ellis claimed after the penalty was levied against him that he had in effect been penalized for mechanical failure, that the The pump, which operates the fan and connects to the alternator, had malfunctioned during the course of his qualifying. NASCAR said, we don't care how, we just know that you got extra horsepower. And there is Ellis right now in car number 18 as he continues to move up through the field after starting in 42nd and last position. That is A.J. Foyt on the left side of the screen, and right now you are watching Ellis clearly with more power, Sam, going to the inside of the track and easily by Foyt.
Better handling in any case. He ran down low. We're now back to the front. This is Dale Earnhardt leading up front, but Ellis will keep our eye on him, although I suspect he will sort of stall out around 9th or 10th place.
The leader remains Dale Earnhardt in car number 3. Morgan Shepherd behind him in car number 47. Just behind Shepherd is Bill Elliott. It is still Tim Richmond in 4th place, and they string out from there.
At this stage of the race, how important is speed? How important is jockeying for position? You've got almost 500 miles to go. Well, obviously, the track here is only 1.5 miles long. You don't want to get a lap back of the leader, and at this rate, Earnhardt, although by the first fuel stops at about the 100-mile mark, would not be a lap ahead of the 2nd and 3rd place men. He might easily be a lap ahead of people running as high as 10th. So speed is important. People are not laying back by any stretch of the imagination. You see the case in point. He's already put one of the competitors a lap down.
And we mentioned earlier that Earnhardt is known as a charger. It's particularly germane in the wake of his crash with Waltrip at Richmond recently. Here's what Earnhardt said to us earlier this week about his aggressive driving nature.
Well, I thought that's what, you know, anytime you was a competitor, you're supposed to be aggressive to a point, whether it be football, basketball, or what. If you're going to be good in any sports, you're going to have to go out and go for it. And sometimes you get on the ragged edge, sometimes you make mistakes. Well, I made a mistake, and we come to Atlanta, it's going to be the same thing here. I'm going to have to go out there and race and do everything I can do to go out and win and get aggressive some. But as far as going out and wrecking somebody intentionally or trying to hurt somebody or trying to put somebody out of a race, that's not my style. That's not what I'm out there to try to do.
At some point during the course of the day, we hope to offer you a look at what happened in Richmond, and there is still discussion among all of the racers on this circuit about the confrontation, or supposed confrontation, between Dale Earnhardt and Darrell Waltrip at Richmond.
Well, we look forward to seeing that. But the battle for second has really heated up, with Elliott well positioned now inside of Morgan Shepherd and Tim Richmond, who started on the front row, coming right up. So there's a three-way battle for second, with Elliott positioned better than any of the other cars. It's a little bit of a chess game. You give a little bit away on one turn in order to be better positioned on another. Elliott has been waiting to make the move he's making now for about 3 laps. But you see, he's got Morgan Shepherd now on the outside of him, and Elliott should be able to play the trump card of being down low to get by. Now, I raise a question now about how well Elliott's car is handling, because if that was Earnhardt's car there, he'd be by Morgan Shepherd and gone. And as you can see, Tim Richmond's having no trouble staying with him.
Well, here in 3-car form, Sam, is the very confrontation everyone's been talking about between a Ford car and 2 General Motors cars. Morgan Shepherd's car, number 47, is a Buick. Tim Richmond's car, which is the 3rd car in that duel right there, is, of course, a Chevrolet. And Ford is Elliott's car, number 9, on the inside of the track. So dominant the first half of the season a year ago. This year, apparently struggling to find its footing in the early going.
Well, it really is. And incidentally, as we say Ford and Chevrolet, understand they are not really Fords and Chevrolets as you buy them in the showroom, you know, and just come out here and tune them up and race them. They are pure racing cars. The chassis, the suspension, the brakes, everything is made purely for racing. And then a body that closely resembles a Ford or a Chevrolet is put over that chassis. So we're using the term Ford and Chevrolet very loosely here, and I hope everybody understands that. But there are subtle aerodynamic differences between the Ford bodies and the Chevrolet and Pontiac General Motors bodies, and they often tell the story. Elliott has prevailed here, Jim, but it is nothing like the strength that he was able to show last year. In a confrontation like that last year, he would have been like a prize fighter with his gloves off. You know, he would have punched those guys out and been gone. And here, he was barely able to eke away from them.
Thus far, there have been no yellow caution flags in the race, so the cars have been running full out, just as their mechanics would want them to be going ever since the start of the race. The fuel tank limit for a stock car of this sort is about 100 miles. So if we don't see any caution flags, we can expect the beginning of pit stops after about 100 miles. There are 42 pits to cover. We have our two most athletic ABC sportscasters here to cover them, Tim Brandt and Al Troutwig. And quickly now, let's go down for an update from Tim Brandt.
Jim, you and Sam have been talking about how these cars are basically race cars in the suspension parts. The body, of course, the stock part is just like you buy from the Detroit manufacturers. One very, very big difference, of course, is in these tires. Every tire has a different circumference, and that is extremely important, especially on a track like this, where they are half-mile turns, and it seems as if you are turning the entire time. It gives you an impression. You put the smaller tires down like this cup on the inside, the bigger tires out on the outside, and it'll roll like this into those turns. It keeps these cars turning on this type of track, where it is a half-mile turn on each end, and the straightaway is just a quarter of a mile long. There is Dale Earnhardt, who is turning around this Atlanta track faster than any of his 41 competitors. Right now, Earnhardt still in the lead. We'll be back to the Atlanta 500. Almost 50 miles into the Atlanta 500, there is a look at the man who is picking his way through back-of-the-pack traffic and currently holding on to the lead, as he has since leaving the pole position at the start of the race. Number 3, Dale Earnhardt in command. Bill Elliott has taken over second place ahead of Morgan Shepherd, who leads. Tim Richmond, Harry Gant, Cale Yarborough, and Rusty Wallace. His qualifying speed here for Earnhardt was just over 170 miles per hour, almost 171 miles an hour. That is on a lap of 32.1 seconds, roughly. We're going to take a look now at a full lap for Earnhardt. Obviously, they will not be turning quite as fast as in qualifying at this point, Sam Posey, but anything between 32 and 33 seconds is a very fast lap here at Atlanta.
Well, exactly. Imagine that the lap he's turning now is about in the high 160s range. In the turns, he'll only be going about 160. On the straight, he'll probably go about 180. That's roughly the speed range.
34.1, so you can see they have slowed considerably since qualifying day Friday as they begin to pace themselves for the 500-mile-per-hour haul. 34.1 is just a little bit around 164, 165 miles per hour for Earnhardt at this moment. And right now, let's go down to our other pit reporter, Al Troutwig. Al?
Jim, Sam Posey perhaps said that Bill Elliott was having some handling problems. Here's Ernie Elliott. Ernie, has Bill said anything to you about handling problems with the car?
No, it's just too early to tell. You know, right now you just kind of ride out. You got to start the race on the tires you qualified on. So right now, you know, you just kind of riding everything out. You know, feeling the car out, seeing if that's a good setup to run all day. You know, checking to make sure the racetrack makes any changes or anything like that. Right now, it's just too early.
Okay, thank you, Ernie. By the way, Bill Elliott's crew has more tires than any other pit. 34 tires are here, getting ready to be placed on that number 9 if they need to throughout the day. Back to you, Jim.
All right, thanks, Al, and that brings up an interesting point. If Earnhardt or any other of the early leaders are able to isolate at this point in the race, Sam Posey, a set of tires that they really like, they may put them aside and save them for the late push.
Well, exactly, because they know that the car is handling right with that set of tires on, and it's just like Tim Brandt showed us with the stagger, the rolling the little cup around. If you get the tires that you want, you put them aside before they're too worn down, and then you use them later when it really counts.
There's a good look at Jeff Bodine, 36 years old from Chemung, New York, driving a Chevrolet in which he won the Daytona 500 at the start of this season. Many believe that this could be the year when Bodine, who has improved markedly in each year since he joined the circuit, could really explode in the way that Elliott did a year ago. And there is a look inside the car as Jeff Bodine continues his day at work in the Atlanta 500.
You get some idea of the steepness of the banks, 24 degrees. You see now, Jeff Bodine, incidentally, innovated power steering. He brought power steering into NASCAR racing, so if he's making a little less physical effort than some of the others, that's part of the explanation. You see the netting beside his head there? That's so if he slams into the wall, his head won't come out of the car and hit the wall itself. If we pan across there, you get some idea of the speed of the pits rushing by on the inside. We pick up the car that, of course, he's concentrating on the most right at the moment, the car that is pursuing him. You always have to watch your rear view mirror because you don't want to get in anyone's way. You want to understand what's going on out there on the track.
Good look at what is going on from inside Jeff Bodine's car. When last I was able to check the standings correctly, Bodine was in 8th place, exactly the position in which he started the race. We've had a remarkably clean first 50 miles in this Atlanta 500. So far, I have seen only one car pull into the pits.
See the bars there? Well, we'll get back to that when we look next time from inside the car. We have resumed here with a look at what is now the battle for third. Morgan Shepherd, that's third, fourth, and fifth we're looking at.
The leaders remain Earnhardt in first place, Elliott in second place, and now Gant, Bouchard, and Richmond battling for third, fourth, and fifth. Harry Gant, Ron Bouchard, and Tim Richmond, two of the young bloods on the circuit in Bouchard and Richmond. And Harry Gant is a polished veteran who is almost always around at the finish.
Yes, he is. In fact, I'm surprised to see him run quite that well this early in the race. But, Jim, as you explained earlier, the early stage of this race is going to be a little unusual because there was so little practice due to the rain in the last few days. And so the way a car is handling now, there's no real indication of how it's going to handle later. As you well know, there's so many ways to adjust the car, the different tires that you put on it, to suspension changes that you can make, even aerodynamic changes that you can make as the race goes on. I was interested by what Ernie Elliott said when he dispelled my fear that perhaps Bill Elliott's car wasn't handling that well. Obviously, they know they've got a long race ahead of them. They're not dismayed that Bill's car didn't seem to have extreme bite. After all, they are running second, and a very clean second, too, which is the best they've been doing this year. So I think I underestimated the Bill Elliott potential a little bit.
Well, there is, of course, a modicum of driver skill involved in this, and Bill Elliott, regardless of what his mechanical situation may be early in this season, has proven, particularly last year, that he is an extraordinarily talented driver.
Well, I think that's where racing on this track here in Atlanta makes such a contrast with racing at Daytona, which many people saw a month ago. Here, it is all the turns. Look at it. It's exactly what we talked about. It's a mile and a half around. Each of these long turns is half a mile. The straightaways are only a quarter of a mile. You better believe there's a lot of driving involved. In fact, you don't go into the turns flat out, as we watch Bill Elliott here. You have to brake a little bit as you go into the turn and then accelerate back up to speed. It's a very delicate operation the whole way. These are enormous cars. I mean, they weigh 3,700 pounds with no fuel and no driver aboard. So it's over 2 tons of car out there on really very narrow tires, say, compared to an Indianapolis car. It's a delicate game of balancing an elephant on what really feels when you're in one of the cars like little roller coasters underneath you.
Right now, Elliott is about 3.5 seconds behind the leader, Dale Earnhardt. As you see there on the screen, we widen out to show you exactly what 3.5 seconds mean. Earnhardt looks like he's a long way ahead as they go down the backstretch. The difference is actually just about 3.5 seconds. And certainly, to this early point in the race, that is the kind of working margin which indicates precisely what you said before the race, Sam Posey, that Earnhardt's car is the quickest and has seemed to be the best acclimatized to this track, given the limited practice time available to drivers here this week. It did rain most of Thursday and Friday, and that caused most of the drivers to miss substantial practice time. It means that those who are more familiar with the track, such as Bill Elliott, and of course a veteran like Dale Earnhardt, will have a bit of an advantage. Right now, Earnhardt clearly the quickest car and still well ahead in the lead.
Oh, he's whipping right around Ron Bouchard there, who ran very well at Daytona. Unusual to see Bouchard lap this early in the going. That's what I mean about how critical it is. If you get a lap down, a yellow comment comes out, everybody bunches up, you are stuck a lap down. And so at the moment, Earnhardt's pace is making it very difficult, not for Elliott here, not for some of the other front runners, but guys back in 9th, 10th, and 11th.
One problem caused by the shortage of practice time, Sam, is that a lot of these teams are guessing on how to set the car up for the race. A couple of days ago, we asked Bill Elliott himself, if you guess wrong on setting up the car, how are you able to correct it during the course of the race?
That's a key to thing about it. You got to really work harder on the pit stops to try to you know, if I think it's going to be a cool day and I set the car up one way and it turns out to be a real hot day, or the track changes more than what I think it's going to change, because I've been to most of the places and I got a pretty good idea how the track's going to change. Then you're just always working all day long trying to get something back to where you can run halfway decent in the race. And a lot of times, sometimes you get it back, and then sometimes if one car is really running good, they can get you behind before you do catch up.
And for now, a persistent cloud cover is keeping the temperature here in the 60s, which amounts to a relatively cool day by stock car racing standards. So there is the leader, Dale Earnhardt, still well ahead of the man you just heard from, second place Bill Elliott, as their confrontation continues early in the Atlanta 500. We'll be at Atlanta International Raceway, still very early in the Atlanta 500, which follows by 1 month the first big stock car racing jewel of the season, the Daytona 500. This has appeared early to be a wide-open season, but there is a man who could establish dominance in this season, if indeed that is to be on the part of any one driver. Dale Earnhardt, who is currently in the lead ahead of last year's most dominant driver, Bill Elliott. Now let's go down for a report from Al Troutwig. Al?
Jim, of course, not much happening right now in the Dale Earnhardt pit, which is headed up by Kirk Shelmerdine. Kirk, how are things running in that number 3?
Everything's fine right now. We've got a long way to go.
Has Dale said anything about the way the car is performing yet?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Has Dale said anything to you about the way the car is performing?
No, he just said everything's okay. And, we're going to wait it out and see what the track does.
Okay, running in front, Dale Earnhardt. Back to you, Jim.
All right, thanks, Al. And we have already mentioned to you the confrontation between Earnhardt and Darrell Waltrip, which took place in a race at Richmond 3 weeks ago, occasioned a disciplinary measure on the part of NASCAR directed against Dale Earnhardt. Sam Posey, let's take a look at precisely what happened there.
It starts out, we hear what Darrell Waltrip had to say about the incident, and then we'll have a look at the incident.
I'm sorry it happened. I don't want to be involved in these kinds of things. And when you run up front and when you win a lot of races and when you're trying to win a race, you're going to be involved in controversies. If you run back in the pack, if somebody runs over you, who cares? But if you're trying to win the race and somebody runs over you, then obviously it creates a lot of attention. What happened at Rockingham is just a deal where I think Dale was trying to get a little bit of something to go in on Monday morning or Tuesday morning, whenever it was with. He didn't give me much room, and we did rub together, but it certainly wasn't like what happened at Richmond.
As we watch what happened, it's clear that Earnhardt hits Waltrip from behind, causing both cars to spin into the wall. Earnhardt, it would seem, is the villain, Waltrip, the innocent victim. But to fully understand the incident, realize that it's a time-honored technique to tap your opponent in the bumper, making him slide harmlessly out of the way as you duck through on the inside. Any driver worth his salt does this routinely, especially on the slower and therefore safer tracks such as this one. Where Earnhardt went wrong, and here we see it again, was in hitting Waltrip so hard that both cars went out of control, and surely this wasn't what he had in mind. So to me, it suggests that Waltrip was up to something himself, slowing early for the turn in an effort to throw off Earnhardt's timing.
Well, what happened up there was a mistake on my part. You know, we got fined for it. NASCAR says it was reckless intent. You know, I don't see it that way, and it's just an argument between us and NASCAR. You know, they rule on it, but yet they wouldn't rule on Darrell hitting us on the caution flag afterwards. So, you know, you got to take it. You signed up to join NASCAR and signed up Interblank to run that race, and you got to run under those rules. So they're the governing body. You got to take what they give you and go on.
Now, what is fascinating, Sam Posey, is to note that Earnhardt is doing for Darrell Waltrip to a certain degree what a fellow named John McEnroe once did for Jimmy Connors in tennis. Waltrip, though not having been accused of being reckless, has been called self-motivated, petulant, and has not always been popular among fans and other racers in this sport. Now suddenly he is more so.
Waltrip has really been working on his image over the last couple of years, because he did come into this sport as sort of Peck's bad boy. There's no question about it. Very fast-mouthed, very intelligent kind of guy. We look again at Bill Elliott running second, and I think that now that Earnhardt has shown his true stripes, which is a very tough-minded guy who I happen, incidentally, to like enormously, he is taking some of the heat off Waltrip. Waltrip alluded to, or Earnhardt alluded to what happened right after that incident, by the way. Both cars were crumpled, and Waltrip, barely able to steer his, waited for the backstretch, took a shot, and demolished both of the cars. So it was a tit-for-tat thing, and he got even. We're going to have a look now at Darrell Waltrip, who is struggling at this point in the race. He's tried the high line, which you see him running here. He's tried the low line. He can't seem to satisfy himself at this stage. But as we said before, we heard Ernie Elliott say in the interview, it doesn't really matter critically. But 14th is very, very far back for Darrell Waltrip. The key thing is, will he be lapped before the first round of pit stops, which give him an opportunity to set his car up a little bit better.
First car out of the race, Bill Parsons, number 66, has been black flagged.
They are working on Parsons' car in the pits. The car appears to be mechanically sound, except that he ran over his air hose in a pit stop just before. It was an unscheduled stop. There he is. He's just leaving the pits now. There's a rule that when the air hoses are deployed out from the wall and across the track for the men changing the tires on the outside of the car, that you're not allowed to pull out of the pits until those air hoses have been folded back in. So Parsons penalized, but only a few seconds to hold in the pits. There's Dale Earnhardt leading.
Meanwhile, Sam, number 64, Dwayne Pancho Carter, last year's pole sitter at the Indianapolis 500, has gone to the garage. So we apparently will not be seeing Pancho anymore during the course of the day. And there's another look at 33-year-old Dale Earnhardt in a Chevrolet, regular on the circuit since 1979, won this race in 1980, 6 years ago. It was his first super speedway win.
Here comes A.J. Foyt into the pits. These are, I would start to say, scheduled stops at this point. Foyt's Oldsmobile bodied car. A little fresh paint job for this year. A.J. is starting to take NASCAR racing more seriously. He knows that it's a tough road to hoe here, that he's up against champions who have highly skilled teams, an awful lot of money. A.J. is still dividing his energies to see his crew, maybe not, I don't know, we'll have to see from the time, but I would say maybe not as sharp as some of the NASCAR crews that we'll see. That is a little bit slow. We'll see the same things done, the outside tires change and refuel, in 3 to 4 seconds slower. So Foyt is still feeling his way in NASCAR.
Big upset, Sam, in the NCAA basketball tournament. Navy having knocked off Syracuse in the Carrier Dome in Syracuse. Navy, with their brilliant center, David Robinson, advances in the NCAA tournament, and Robinson, I am told, had 35 points today. There is Dale Earnhardt, and he is now slowing down and moving to the inside of the track.
He's in trouble. Even if he's not coming into the pits, he is out going down the back. He's coming around now. He may have stretched the fuel too long. It was problems with fuel that cost Earnhardt the Daytona 500. He may once again have tried to stretch it a little bit too far.
Remember that Earnhardt was in position to slingshot past Jeff Bodine and win the Daytona 500 when suddenly at the denouement of that race he ran out of gas. Here, just from the look of it, it may again be fuel problems for Earnhardt.
Yeah, but if so, he isn't going to pay too dearly, although he'll have lost the lead. All right, now they just performed the same thing exactly that Foyt's team did. But wait a minute, what is going on here? The entire crew, and you're only allowed 6 men over the wall. They must have had 8 or 9 getting it started. As at Daytona, Jim, he stalled the car coming in. Earnhardt seems to, I'm not in the car and I don't know the circumstances, but he seems to have a habit of coming in so hot that he stalls it. Well, no. Obviously, in this case, he had run out of gas. That's why, and it was hard for them to get it started. I'm wrong.
I counted 9 men over the wall.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, counting the man on the near side.
Yeah.
That is a gang. And what did you say? The rule is 6.
Well, you're allowed 6. But what happens when you get too many? Here comes Elliott in. Is that they fine you only about $100 a man. So, whoa! That was a close call with Benny Parsons and Bill Elliott in the pits. Typical NASCAR racing, very close stuff there. Don't think that the crewman, by the way, look at the man changing the rear tire. He will glance occasionally up the track. He's already done it once to make sure that some car isn't barreling down on him.
Bill Elliott had temporarily taken the lead when Earnhardt came in. Now he has surrendered it. For the moment, number 33, Harry Gant, is the man on the lead, but Gant has not yet pitted, and he'll have to come in fairly shortly.
Look at Elliott get back up to speed, shooting by Richmond. Let's watch as Elliott comes into the pits. We see him here. Watch his man changing that rear tire. Whoops, here we go. All right, we're going to see him come in, which he came in awfully fast. And this is where he has that near miss with Benny Parsons. Watch this. Parsons is right now pulling out of his pit there, number 55. Bill Elliott pulls right in front of him, the kind of thing that causes bad accidents. And look at that.
And it looks slow on the screen because we're doing it there in slow motion. But these cars go from 0 to 60 in a hiccup, and that was quite a dangerous little brush there between Benny Parsons and Bill Elliott. There's Harry Gant, number 33, the leader. You see Elliott sneaking right back up on him as Elliott unlaps himself, having temporarily gone a lap down as a result of the pit stop. So when Harry Gant comes in, Elliott will be in good position to perhaps reassume the lead.
Of course, Elliott's car running exceptionally well now with those new tires on the outside. Anytime you can take on fresh tires, your car is bound to handle very well. They're cool. They give very good grip for at least 7-8 laps. That's one reason you see cars come out of the pit and seemingly shoot by the cars that were, you know, running at the last stage of their time before coming into the pit.
We are just about 100 miles into this 500-mile race. The leader for the moment is number 33, Harry Gant, driving a Chevrolet, a regular on the circuit since 1979. Harry Gant is 46 years old, labored for years. Finally got a breakthrough in 1984 and 1985 when he got the kind of equipment which made him a contender. Very quickly, let's go down to Al Troutwig.
Jim, I think we may have a media blackout in the Dale Earnhardt pits. I just went up to Kirk Shelmerdine and said, Kirk, what just happened? He said, we took a pit stop. I said, I know that. Did you run out of gas? He said, no. And off went Dale Earnhardt, and it looked as though he ran out of gas from down here. But we've been unable to confirm it. So back to you, hoping to raise the blackout.
Well, it would not be terribly surprising if the Earnhardt crew were getting a little bit sensitive about that particular issue. Certainly, they have not heard the last of it regarding the Daytona 500.
Well, exactly. But obviously, if it was a miscalculation, it was a small one. I don't think it's really hurt them that much in this particular incident. What would make me concerned if I was their pit crew, and they really have run out of gas, is that they must be consuming more gas, by and large, than the other cars out there who were able to go further. We saw Elliott go around with no trouble and come in. We saw some of the other leaders able to keep going. That could be a severe tactical disadvantage later in the race, and that's something I'd be concerned about. It may be, as we see Harry Gant come into the pit here, that some of Earnhardt's speed, Jim, is a result of pulling what they call a tighter gear. He may be revving his engine up more, which is a reason that he would get worse gas mileage. Just a lot of supposition at this stage, but such are some of the elements of strategy that these crew chiefs have to play with as the race drags along.
Very quick pit stop for Gant, who is now out, and there's a look at number 47, Morgan Shepherd, who in Gant's pit stop has assumed the lead on the track. But again, Shepherd has not yet pitted, so he'll be going in very shortly. But for right now, Morgan Shepherd is the leader, a little bit beyond 1/5 of the way into the Atlanta 500 stock car race. Back at Atlanta International Raceway, the pit stop still continuing just past the 100-mile mark of this 500-mile Atlanta 500. And the leader for the moment is 29-year-old Rusty Wallace of Greensboro, North Carolina, who in 1980, driving a car outfitted by Roger Penske, finished a surprise second in this race, but then never really had a regular ride on the stock car racing circuit until 1984. For the moment, he is enjoying a brief visit to the sunlight. And there is number 15, Ricky Rudd. We are told that Wallace has come in for the pit stop. And so at the moment, officials here are identifying that man, Ricky Rudd, in a Ford as the leader in the race. Rudd out of Chesapeake, Virginia, the Rookie of the Year 8 years ago. Finished 4th here last year and is always in the hunt for top dollar in stock car racing as he has emerged in recent years to become a growing force. So it is Rudd, Gant, Tim Richmond, number 9, Bill Elliott, the 4 leaders on lap 73 of 328 laps in this race.
Ricky Rudd is also a man with an inquiring mind, and he's become interested in aviation. He's a pilot, very good one, and he hopes in the next couple of weeks to make a landing on an aircraft carrier, an F-18, not as the pilot, but as a passenger. He's undergone some survival training. What would happen, in other words, if the plane didn't make it onto the deck of the carrier but went into the water? He's learned to swim with a pack and all this gear on without sinking. And he's a fascinating guy whose mind ranges well beyond racing into other areas.
Driving in a car outfitted by Bud Moore, who is one of the half dozen or so top car owners in the long history of the sport. And there's a look at Cale Yarborough picking his way through traffic. We remind you, we have 2 race cameras in 2 cars here. One of them, Jeff Bodine's car, number 5, and the other, as you can see there, in the cockpit of Cale Yarborough. There are actually 2 cameras, one which can face forward or backward or in any direction in the cockpit from behind Yarborough's shoulder, and that smaller camera, which you see faces directly up at Cale to give us an idea of what the driver's doing.
All right, have a look there. Again, we were going to have a look at the windshield and see those bars, see them on the rear window there, that keep the glass, should it break or shatter in any way, falling in on the driver. Remember, the speeds here are enormous. The loading aerodynamically on that windshield is enormous. You see his range of instruments, the one with the red needle on it on the extreme left, just under his hand, is the tachometer, which is his indication of his relative speed at any given moment. Remember, these cars do not have speedometers in them. To the right of the tachometer, you see an instrument that is his oil pressure gauge. To the left, it's his water temperature gauge. Those are his 2 most critical gauges right by the tachometer. As we look to the right, the next gauge is the oil temperature, which shouldn't run more than 240. He's running cool right now, very cool. All his instruments look good. And the one that's flickering a little bit right there just off of his arm is the fuel pressure gauge, running looks like about 5 pounds. That's plenty. It's when it starts to really flicker and sweep up and down that you know you're in trouble. Right now, Cale Yarborough, all of his instrumentation looks very, very good. Looks like a busy man in that cockpit, though, doesn't he? He, too, has power steering. You see him going into turn 1. He has just lifted off a little, used the brake. Here's where he's trying to get back on the throttle. Right about here as he comes down, can you hear him start to pick it up a little as he sweeps back out toward the turn? By the way, Cale has the best batting average, so to speak, here in Atlanta of any driver. So here's a man psychologically very at home. And you see that undulating line on the inside. To a driver, that means everything. He's positioning his car relative to that line, and he knows within 6 inches whether he's got the car exactly where he wants it or not. 180 miles an hour there, and back to the leader, Ricky Rudd, with Ron Bouchard just outside of him there.
Yarborough is driving a Ford, as is Ricky Rudd, number 15, there on your screen. These cars are, as Sam Posey has already pointed out, dramatically different from the Fords, Chevrolets, Pontiacs, etc., which you would buy at your local car lot. In fact, so different that we put together a small feature report on some of the differences you might be facing if you're looking for one of these Fords or Chevys.
Well, last year, Fords dominated most of the major speedways. At least one of the Fords dominated the big speedways, and that was Bill Elliott. Our cars ran awfully well. Not quite. We didn't have the success that he had, but we were able to win during 1985. 1986 looks like a little bit different deal. I think NASCAR came in and they looked at last year's season and they felt like they needed a rule change to try to get the General Motors more competitive on the big track. And I imagine it's a very difficult situation for them, you know, trying to find a fine line to make all the manufacturers happy. And last year it looked like Ford was going pretty good, and they made a rule change, allowed the new body styles to be run this year, and now all of a sudden it looks like it swung the other way. It's gone 180 degrees the other direction. It looks like the GM cars now have the advantage. So I guess we'll just have to sit tight and hope that NASCAR tries to even things back up a little bit. And I imagine a lot of it will probably be determined at Atlanta this weekend, how the Fords shape up against the GM cars.
That manufacturer's confrontation was embodied early in the race, as you saw, between Dale Earnhardt and Bill Elliott, who was in second place. Earnhardt in a GM car, Elliott, who is, of course, the flagship car for Ford Motor Company. Right now, Ricky Rudd motors on in his Ford, and we'll be back. Back at the Atlanta International Raceway, where for the moment a yellow flag is out. You are looking at car number 4, Rick Wilson. Recently had a small tussle with the wall, and now Wilson is back out on the track, Sam Posey.
This is what you would call turn 4. It's the end of the second long turn. As you can see, he hits the wall reasonably hard, but I guess he doesn't hit it. He must have just grazed it. I was going to say that there's reinforcing tubes of steel behind those front bumpers, so you can actually hit the wall substantially and still be able to continue. Evidently, he didn't hit it at all. Terrific driving there.
He visited the pits briefly and then went back out onto the track. So there you can see Wilson in car number 4 as he continues on his way after that brief brush with danger here at the Atlanta International Raceway. We are just past 100 miles into a 500-mile race, Sam. Let me suggest that maybe 2 significant things have happened so far. Number 1, in the early laps, Dale Earnhardt seemed to prove what everyone suspected, which was that his car is superior for the moment on this track. Number 2, if we get our guess right, he ran out of gas again.
Yeah, and it sets up 2 stories that I think we're going to see unfold in the next hour or so, which is Earnhardt trying to make up the lost ground, and the Ford story. I mean, Ford is suddenly, it would seem, not dominating the event, but very much back in the hunt. The form of Bill Elliott, Ricky Rudd, a couple of the other guys, they are starting to run well, so maybe there's a little more parity in the rules than I imagined.
All right, and while we are watching the cars run under the yellow and therefore in fixed position, let's take a look at some of the problems you might face if you tried to buy one of these cars.
Hi, I'm Honest Johnny. You can trust me. Howdy. Welcome to Honest Johnny's Previously Owned Automobiles. I'm Honest Johnny, and you are?
Sam Posey, and
this lovely lady is your sister.
well, actually, that's my grandmother. You see, I just recently bought this 1986 Pontiac 2+2, and she'd like to have one exactly like it to drive to church on Sunday. Trouble is, we can't afford another new car. We'd like a used one. Do you have one like it?
Honest Johnny has the finest selection of quality low-mileage discount cars anywhere. In fact, right here, Mr. Posey, a 1986 Pontiac 2+2 at rock-bottom prices.
$85,000. Honest, Johnny, we can't afford to buy this car.
You can't afford not to buy this car. Consider some of the features on this fine automobile. Features you may not have to enjoy on your own car, Mr. Posey.
Ah, Grandma.
Ain't no doors to fuss with. These are welded shut, can't fly open by accident.
How's she run, Honest Johnny?
This fine car can attain speeds up to 200 miles per hour.
200 miles an hour? She only needs to drive it to church.
But you don't want her to be late now, do you, Mr. Posey? Of course not. Now, with this 650 horsepower engine...
650 horsepower. I bet it doesn't get very good mileage.
Mileage? 4 miles to the gallon. But you don't have to worry about that. With a good pit crew, you can fill her up in under 14 seconds. Trust me.
It doesn't look very safe.
Safe? Just look at that roll bar over there and all this seatbelt stuff, just like in an airplane. Go ahead, put it on. And you know what else? The gas tank has a lining of thick rubber so that no matter how hard you crash this thing, the tank won't split open and cause a messy fire.
The seat looks...
Orthopedic. Orthopedic, that's right, Mr. Posey. And this baby don't need no key. It starts with this switch here, see? And with no side windows, you've got our all-natural 2+200 ventilating system. 2 open windows, 200 miles an hour. Hey, disc brakes, 4 on the floor, 2-tone paint job. Matches her eyes.
I like it, Sammy.
Ain't no muffler to rust out neither.
Oh, Grandma!
Now, Mr. Posey, Sam, I'll call you Sam. Sam, let me tell you about our finances.
Look, Jim, there's Grandma now. I think she's been doing pretty well in the race so far.
Yeah, and let me tell you about their financing.
Yeah, of course, that's Ron Bouchard, and we really thank him and his team for lending us the car. You know, it points up, I think, the fact, as we see Tim Richmond, the leader under yellow, that one of the reasons NASCAR has been so successful through the years is that people really are willing almost to believe that the stock car is similar to the street car, while in fact they are not similar at all.
One of the noteworthy characteristics of stock car racing, they bunch up under the yellow flag. So we will have a whole new competition when we come back. At a 500 live, we remain under the yellow flag. You can see that we are on lap 92 of 328, so that we are well more than a quarter into the race. Tim Richmond is listed as the leader for the moment, with Benny Parsons in second place. There is apparently some discussion of the scoring going on right now, but for the time being, Richmond is the first place driver, Benny Parsons in second place, Cale Yarborough third. Now let's take a look at what is happening in the NCAA basketball tournament. You can see that Alabama has shaded Illinois in the big upset already today. Navy beat Syracuse in the Carrier Dome in Syracuse, and David Robinson, the brilliant Navy center, regarded by some as the best pivot man in the country, 35 points, 9 rebounds, 8 blocked shots. Out of the race so far here in Atlanta, Pancho Carter, last year's Indy 500 pole sitter, out on lap 26 with an engine problem. Joe Ruttman, another USAC driver in the past, and his background, out on lap 40. Phil Parsons, whose father, Benny Parsons, is now in second place, ran over an air hose on lap 53, and Jimmy Means is out as of lap 87 after having briefly touched the wall.
Let's think about what this yellow and when it came out means to the structure of the race. It was obviously a great break for Dale Earnhardt, because he is now only a little bit behind the actual leader, and when he is able to unleash that superior speed, if he still has it after his pit stop, the job of closing up on the leader will be easier than it was. Cale Yarborough has benefited considerably also. He was further back by far than this, and he, after the pit stop, had seemed to get going, so we may see Cale coming very much to the fore, and will of course be riding with him. Tim Richmond is getting a chance to rest, which is very important for him because he's driving injured. At Daytona in one of the qualifying races, you see Richmond there right behind the pace car. He hurt his neck and back very badly, and he has not returned to full fitness yet.
And he has one of the most varied backgrounds in the race, Sam. You know, he was Indianapolis 500 Rookie of the Year back in 1980 before moving into NASCAR racing. And he told us a little earlier about the inferiority complex he experienced when first moving to this form of racing.
Well, I came from sprint cars and super modifieds, Indianapolis cars, then to stock cars, and it was, you know, it was an adjustment that I did think was inferior to actors, to a lot of people. It almost, you know, I don't want the people of my sport or our sport to take this wrong, but I did feel a little inferior, or maybe a little embarrassed. Why, I don't know. Okay. That was my problem and not everybody else's, and now it's just the other way. You know, I'm not better than anybody else, but I darn sure do something that's all right, that I feel is okay in my book, and I hope it's okay in everybody else's, because driving a Chevrolet with Folgers coffee on the side of it and Exxon motor oil, and those aren't plugs, but that's America, you know. That is, you know, and I'm an American racing in America. You know, that is cool. That's 200-mile-an-hour knee, you know.
And they are still under the yellow flag as the man who is cool, Tim Richmond, remains in first place. Now there, lurking close to the lead, is Cale Yarborough, and during yellow flags, when given permission, Sam Posey has the option of talking to a driver in that situation. Sam, let's see if you can get through to Cale.
Cale, this is Sam Posey. Can you hear me? Cale, this is Sam Posey. Can you hear me? Well, we can hear his engine sound up here, and I see that he is trying to talk to us. But unfortunately, Cale, we are not hearing you. We'll work on that, and meantime, wish you good luck. Obviously, you've come well up from the starting position, and things are looking good.
All right, we will try to get back to Cale Yarborough later, if the mechanics of this situation allow us the opportunity to talk to him. the man from Sardis, South Carolina, known by some to be from Timminsville, South Carolina, but he actually lives in Sardis. Third place on the all-time list with 50 super speedway wins. And he has been, Sam Posey, the leading money winner in the history of this particular racetrack, having started 40 races here and having won 7 of them. A lot of people whom you spoke to here within the past few days figured that, particularly with the lack of practice time occasioned by the rain, Cale Yarborough would be one to watch in this race. Right now, Yarborough remains lurking near the lead under the yellow flag. Tim Richmond still in front. We'll be back with more exclusive coverage after this word from trouble. We are back at Atlanta International Raceway, and the reason for this extremely long yellow flag is a clarification necessary in the scoring. We have been telling you all along that Tim Richmond is the leader under the yellow because he appears at the front of the formation, but in fact, Tim Richmond, the man behind him, Benny Parsons, and Cale Yarborough, the apparent third-place car, dropped a lap because they pitted earlier, so they should be at the tail end of this formation and not at the beginning of it. The leader, in effect, is the man in the 4th car in formation there, number 33, Harry Gant. Now, for more on this, we're going to go down to Tim Brandt, who I believe is in Tim Richmond's pit. Tim?
That is correct, Jim. I am down here with Harry Hyde, who has been talking to this NASCAR official here for the last 10 minutes. What they're doing is they're going over every lap of the race, trying to find out where Tim Richmond was. They say they pitted too early. They came in before the car actually went out. The yellow car, the yellow flag went out. They said Tim Richmond came in. What Harry Hyde is saying is that they came in the same time. They outraced number 9 coming back out. They were the leader going in. They said they should be the leader coming out. They should not be penalized a lap. But while this confusion takes place and while NASCAR tries to work out who, in fact, is the official, and we are trying to find out word right now. NASCAR official is getting some word from upstairs. Harry Hyde, of course, anxiously waiting. He said he's never seen this in NASCAR racing.
They went around the pace car.
Which car, Harry?
You pitted too quick, Harry. You lost the lap. Well, you took it in. That's what they said. But the only thing I want them to tell me is how the hell did I can't have my position like 9 has got it now? They can't just pick us out of a car, just pick us up in the pace car without somebody else being in it. How the hell they just picked us out? I don't know. He said you pitted too quick on the racetrack.
Well, it is.
The pace car was out there, and them guys went around the pace car, and we did. We tried to play it fair. He said you don't have to go with that. He wasn't going to change it. He talked to you after the race. He won't see me after the goddamn race. You tell him that.
Well, obviously you can tell Harry Hyde is upset, Jim Lampley. He is very, very confused. Let me try to get Harry down here. Harry? Harry, of course, trying to get Tim Richmond, trying to update him on the situation.
Huh? That ain't right. Well, I know it ain't, Harry, but it's up here.
Harry, what did they tell you? What did they tell you?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
Obviously, he's upset. Obviously, he says he doesn't agree with what NASCAR officials have said. He said he was the leader coming in. He did not pit too early, and he should be the leader going out. What NASCAR is saying, and it is going to be definitive, I understand here shortly, is that Tim Richmond will, in fact, be penalized a lap. Jim?
Thank you, Tim, and this raises a rather ticklish question, I think, Sam Posey. In this system, which allows cars to bunch up under the yellow and where many drivers will seek an advantage where they see an opportunity to gain one, is it too difficult or too ambiguous, the officiating of these races, Sam Posey?
The errors are made as we see the green being taken and Richmond go on his way now. It seems to me that perhaps 1 or 2 of the 29 races that are held each year may be affected in some way by a scoring mix-up. And we'll never know whether you could call it a scoring error or a scoring dispute. By and large, they do an excellent job. The shorter the track, the tougher it is. The yellow goes out, the pace car goes out, cars are all over the place. And I think until some kind of electronic scoring is instituted, which they are reasonably reluctant to do because of the expense and possible big problems that you can have with that, this system may be the best that you can have. But all the officials say at the end of a race to those who seem to lose out is, hey, maybe the cards will come up a little bit different the next time.
When you saw Harry Hyde and Tim Richmond's pit, certainly they are the crew which believes it has been most penalized by the scoring decision here. And there's the immediate beneficiary. 46-year-old Harry Gant in car number 3 is, for the moment, the leader in the Atlanta 500. We are now timing 1 full lap for Harry Gant. The race speed had been relatively high because of a relatively clean first 100 miles here. But now, as a result of that long yellow flag, the average speed is going to be brought down considerably. 1 year ago, in winning this race, Bill Elliott averaged just over 140 miles per hour for the 500-mile distance. 33.6.
But the interesting thing about that lap speed is that it is faster than Dale Earnhardt's speed of 34.1, which was in the mid-160s that we saw earlier in the race before there were any green flags at all. So, in fact, Harry Gant is moving extremely quickly right now.
Close to 164 miles per hour was the average speed on that lap for Harry Gant.
All right, now you see Dale Earnhardt right behind him, and we see somebody we haven't looked at all day. Richard Petty has moved his way up to 5th. And we speak, of course, of drivers who are legends, and also we speak of drivers who are, like Tim Richmond, driving injured. Richard Petty had a bad accident at Daytona just a month ago, separated his shoulder. He's back. He seems to be all right, and it is terrific to see him in 5th.
And it's interesting that the King would suddenly emerge into 5th place after that long yellow flag and the dispute in scoring. Certainly, I'm not suggesting that he cuts corners, but if there's any man who knows the intricacies of officiating and scoring in NASCAR races and how to gain an advantage therefrom, it is Richard Petty, who for the moment has pulled into 5th place. There are the 1st, 2nd, 3rd place drivers on your screen. Harry Gant at the left of the screen is the man in 1st place. Morgan Shepherd trying to get to the inside of the track to move into 2nd place. Outside of him, Dale Earnhardt stepping on the gas and pulling just a little bit ahead. And we'll be able to watch now to see if Earnhardt's car is handling as advantageously as it seemed to be early in the race when he was able to pull away from the 2nd place car while leading after having the pole position at the start.
Well, we're not going to have to wait for the answer. It isn't handling as well, because earlier, remember, Morgan Shepherd, who was running 2nd, fell steadily back as Dale Earnhardt just pulled away. So it may be, and we talk so much about how these cars change from pit stop to pit stop, depending on a set of tires they have on board, depending on the way their chassis is set. It just may be that at this point, Dale Earnhardt's chassis is not quite the commanding chassis that it was in the early part of the game. On the other hand, it could be he's playing a little bit of a waiting game, anxious to conserve fuel. We see Bill Elliott starting to stalk the 3 leaders. Elliott now in 4th on the right of your screen. There are a number of people, and I'm surprised, Jim, at this deep point in the race at, well over 100 miles, at how many cars are in contention to win this race. What do you think of that? Usually,
well, I think you should point out one statistic which has not yet emerged in this telecast, though certainly we expected it to be in earlier. You go back to last year and look at the last 9 stock car races on this circuit. There have been 9 different winners. I don't know if there's ever been any brief period of time in the history of the sport when things have been quite so wide open.
And, considered, here you see the standings now with Dale.
Oh, those are the winners of the last 9 races. 9 races, 9 different winners going back to last year.
And, it becomes a statistical issue. How do you add to that list without repeating one of the people on that list? How do you get a 10th guy? I mean, it's really tough. You're looking there at the 9 winners in roughly 2/3 of the people in NASCAR that can win one of these events.
Well, I can tell you two names that don't appear on the list. One is a very angry Tim Richmond at this moment, and the other is Richard Petty, who has not won a race since July 4, 1984, when he won the 200th race of his long and illustrious career. There is Earnhardt, still holding off Morgan Shepherd, though certainly, as you have pointed out, he does not have the capacity to pull away from Shepherd as easily as he did in the early going.
Leaders coming out of turn 2, setting out down this extremely short back stretch. Speeds here, 170 180 there, and then onto the brakes, then roll back into the throttle. It looks so smooth and deceptively simple, doesn't it, from the outside, and yet inside, as we've seen from our race cams, it's anything but easy.
Now, most of Thursday and Friday, it rained here, turning the track and the surrounding area, or the infield, I should say, and the area surrounding the outside of the track into a mud bowl. Then the skies cleared yesterday, and we apparently had advantageous weather coming into today's proceedings. But shortly before the race, officials began to worry about the prospect of rain, and I now must point out that a very large dark cloud has emerged to cover the entire track. There is not a glimmer of sunlight to be seen. So for the moment, about a third of the way through the Atlanta 500, these drivers may be waging a battle against time and impending rain. There's a look at the cloud cover, which has suddenly emerged over this course. A crowd of the customary 70,000 or so stock car racing enthusiasts gathered here for this big race. They have come from all over the Southeast. You can see license plates just as numerous from Florida and Alabama and North Carolina and Tennessee as those from Georgia. And right now, they are watching Harry Gant in third place, Bill Elliott in fourth place, in first place, Dale Earnhardt, behind him, Morgan Shepherd. For the Atlanta 500, and this ABC Sports exclusive is being brought to you by Goodyear. You either have Goodyear Eagles or you need them. By Radio Shack, the computer experts, and by Denorex shampoo, help stop dandruff itch with an extra relief medicine, Denorex. We are just beyond 1/3 of the way into this 500-mile race. There are the standings as of the moment. Earnhardt, Shepherd, Gant, Bill Elliott in fourth place, Richard Petty lurking in fifth. Darrell Waltrip has moved up into sixth place. Terry Labonte, who won the most recent race on the circuit and won the pole there at Rockingham, North Carolina 2 weeks ago, has now also moved up among the contenders. There is a good look at Dale Earnhardt. You also can feel, I think, the cloudy skies and the sense of impending rain which has suddenly gripped this area. And Sam Posey, what is the issue involving rain, and is it any incentive to Earnhardt to try to stay there on the lead?
Well, of course, what happens when the rains come is that these cars are running on tires that are slick. They just cannot run even on a substantially damp track on the tires that they have. So this cloud can become a very real strategic issue. A race is an official race if it goes half distance. So obviously we're close enough to half distance that I think they could go from here to their next pit stops. I mean, without having to make a pit stop and still stretch it to half distance. So in a sense, we're looking at a race right now, which the drivers, the lead drivers, may very well regard as being a race to the moment that it rains, rather than 1/3 of the way through a 500-mile race. So if you wanted to hang back, if you wanted to change your chassis and wait for another pit stop, you may have to say to yourself, it's too late. I don't have that luxury. There's too strong a possibility of rain. Now, of course, it can rain, dampen the track, will go to yellow, they'll dry the track off, and the race will resume. That's another possibility. But if it's a real cloudburst, the race could end quite quickly.
The key lap to remember, the halfway mark, is lap 164. We're still more than 40 laps short of that point, as we are on lap 117 of 328. So there are 47 laps still to go to the halfway point in the race. And now, as you continue to look at the leader, Dale Earnhardt, let's go down to Al Trautwig in the pits.
All right, Jim, I'm with Travis Carter, the crew chief of the Harry Gant car. Travis, you have the lead, and then suddenly Dale Earnhardt and Morgan Shepherd blew by your car. Does your car have the strength to keep up with the leader?
Well, I think, you know, at this point in the race, we're still going to have to make a couple of adjustments. Everything was pretty good when the race started. The car was a little bit tight, seemed to work real well, but right now, with the last tires to put on, the car's pushing the front end a little too much. That's a problem for him now. We'll have to adjust the tire stagger a little bit and hopefully work that out. If we can get it back to about a neutral condition, we'll be in real good shape.
All right, plenty of time to make a move. Let's go up pit road to Tim Brandt. Tim?
Okay, Al, I am standing in the winner's circle where Tim Richmond would like to be at the end of this day. But however, that controversy at the last yellow took their people up in here to the official score. Now, ironically, by NASCAR written rule, only the driver can protest or plead a case or get the official scoring. Harry Hyde was trying to do that. He did not get what he wanted. Instead, Tim Richmond was penalized. So Harry Ranier, the club owner, the team owner, went upstairs. Harry is now with me. And Harry, what did they tell you upstairs at the official scores?
The only explanation I can give you is what they gave me. When I went to ask NASCAR about putting us a lap down, all they could tell me was that we pitted too quick when the caution come out. We're sitting right there in our pits beside the caution car. If we pitted too quick, then we've been a lap down every time we've ever pitted this season then.
But talking to Harry Hyde and your lap charters on their side, they charted every lap and they had Tim in the lead.
That's exactly right. We were on the same lap with the front cars. In fact, we were probably running third at the time. I think the other two cars, the 25 and the 55 car, was in front of us. We were probably third at the time.
Will there be a protest filed at the end of the race?
Well, actually, we're going to have to go back and count after the race is over. But yes, sir, I will find out the truth after the race is over.
Okay, Harry, thanks for stopping by. Jim, that's the story down here on the Tim Richmond situation.
That, of course, was Harry Ranier.
Not Harry Hyde, as we were confused. Harry Hyde is involved with the Tim Richmond car. Harry Ranier with Cale Yarborough's car, which it looks as if suffered exactly the same fate that Tim Richmond did. So here are two men, as it happens, both car owners, both with the same name, both with drivers who have been penalized in a way that they think is unfair. Tough situation.
There is the leader, Dale Earnhardt, with a lot to drive for today. Second place belongs to Morgan Shepherd. Bill Elliott is third. Harry Gant is fourth. Just to recap, in case you were not with us at the beginning of the day, Dale Earnhardt is the man who was penalized recently by NASCAR for what they viewed as his role in fostering a late lap crash with Darrell Waltrip at Richmond, which helped to decide that race. Earnhardt didn't feel he should have been penalized. NASCAR made quite a public show of penalizing him for that incident, so he has quite an incentive to come back and try to win today. There is the car number 5, Jeff Bodine, winner at the Daytona 500 earlier this year, and there's a look from the race camera, which we have placed inside of Bodine's car, at Harry Gant's car, right on his rear bumper.
Here is a look right out the back of Jeff Bodine's car, and you can see the psychological effect of looking in your rearview mirror, Tim, because these cars run really close and they loom up very big. And you have to assess what kind of competitor you have behind you. Is he a Dale Earnhardt that might give you a tap, an aggressive driver like a Darrell Waltrip? Or is he a gentleman like Harry Gant, for example? Thoughts like that doubtless are going through Jeff Bodine's mind even as we see him driving. In fact, you saw him glance at the rearview mirror. He's very aware of who's behind him. It will affect somewhat the line he takes through the corners. It'll become a little bit more defensive. You drive differently with somebody behind you than you do without.
Some drivers are known to prefer a low line toward the inside of the track. Some, like Richard Petty, are known to take an extremely high line toward the outside more frequently. You watch for that tendency, as Sam Posey pointed out in the rearview mirror. And Sam, we have made a great deal of drafting in all automobile racing. It's worth mentioning again for any of the viewers who are not familiar with stock car racing. These cars are traveling sometimes at speeds very close to 200 miles per hour, and the margin of difference between the two cars is just as small as it appears there, only a few feet.
Yes, and this shot perfectly illustrates the turbulent air that comes off the back of a Grand National stock car. Look at that hood rippling. You see now, if Harry Gant was running in clear air, the hood would not be rippling like that, but such is the turbulence coming off the back of Jeff Bodine's car that you can see it imploding along the top of that hood. A terrific shot, by the way. It shows you how thin the hoods are, and every now and then a team will stay up all night and, oh, here we go for the pass. All right, he's gotten inside of him. That is not what you might think a good example of drafting. That is merely a tactical maneuver of pulling down inside. He's been running in the draft the whole time, but he wasn't able to use his momentum, as you can see, to get by. He merely pulled down inside and was better positioned. Now watch Jeff Bodine as Harry cuts across in front of him, he'll have to do quite a lot of steering because suddenly the balance of the car will be different. The front of Jeff's car will now not attack as well down into the turns. If we can get a look at his arms steering that car, we will see that he's having to turn the wheel more than he did before.
And Sam, we got to look at how dirty Bodine's windshield appeared to be. It certainly did not appear, given this shot, that Bodine has maximum visibility as he goes around the track.
No, he doesn't. Of course, you do sense the racetrack, and I wouldn't be surprised if our camera was exaggerating that effect a little bit. But again, it's another luck factor in racing. You can be going along and just doing everything right and happen to have the bad luck to follow a car whose engine blows and makes your windshield dirty. Of course, it can be fixed at the pit stop.
Continue to press down toward the halfway point of a race, which momentarily appeared to be threatened by rain. Now the dark cloud seems to be moving over, at least for the moment. We keep a look on the clouds as we do on the leader, number 3, Dale Earnhardt. And another score from the NCAA basketball tournament, North Carolina State leading one of the Cinderella teams, Arkansas Little Rock Conqueror of Notre Dame, 37-33 at halftime. Many North Carolinians keeping an ear peeled to that game while they watch this particular race, since of course college basketball and stock car racing are probably the two most important and culturally attractive sports within the state of North Carolina. And Dale Earnhardt is one of the many North Carolinians who is important within this sport, as is that man, number 47, Morgan Shepherd, who is from Conover, North Carolina, not far from Earnhardt's hometown of Kannapolis.
You speak of the enthusiasm that North Carolinians have for basketball and stock car racing. What are some of the similarities, would you say, between the sport? Look at that. All right, Kyle Petty has crashed into the turn 2 wall. Not a serious impact, but of course it's going to bring out the yellow. Kyle Petty, who won his first race this year after an unbelievable drought of well over 100 races, has crumpled the rear end of his Ford Thunderbird body car. Drives for the Wood brothers.
Certainly had one of the longest waits for his first victory in the history of the sport. And let's take another look now at what happened to Kyle Petty amid a so far largely uneventful race. He is in the middle of the 3 cars that we're looking at right here as they go through that turn.
All right, well, we see him. He pitched the car down quite sharply there, conceivably just too sharply, unless there was a mechanical effect. And because our picture didn't start earlier, you really can't make an accurate judgment. But from where we picked it up, it looked as if he turned it too steeply.
And the yellow has brought a rash of pit stops now. Earnhardt is in. Elliott is in. Various of the other leaders. I can see Benny Parsons is in. Jeff Bodine has come in. Now here comes the number 10 car of Greg Sachs, which has not been among the leaders so far. And perhaps the chief beneficiary of this yellow flag will be Tim Richmond, number 25, of whom we've spoken so much. He was in danger of being lapped by Earnhardt just moments before that crash by Petty. And now, as a result of the yellow, he'll be able to bunch up with the lead pack once again. You saw Harry Gant leaving the pits, as at the moment it is Tim Richmond who has taken over the lead amid all these pit stops. Tim Richmond, who wanted to reassert himself after having lost a lap to what he and his crew must believe to be flawed scoring by NASCAR, in the lead at the moment. Back at Atlanta International Raceway, where at this moment we are in the last lap prior to a green flag. This was going to be a short yellow occasioned by the brush with the wall on the part of Kyle Petty. And during that yellow flag, I believe that every car on the track came in for a pit stop. So now they are lined up in that apparent order. Dale Earnhardt will likely be the leader. And in fact, he will be. You can see him at the front of the pack on the outside in car number 3. It will be Earnhardt on the lead, followed by Harry Gant in car number 33.
Obviously, the cloud has passed enough. Had it not passed, I don't think we would have seen quite so many people pit. I think a couple of cars at least would have gambled on staying out there in hopes of getting the win under rainy conditions. It has cleared up.
Parade of stars at the front, Sam, because after Earnhardt and Gant, It'll be Darrell Waltrip in third place. He has moved up since early in the race when he seemed to be struggling a little bit. Bill Elliott remaining in a steady fourth place. Harry Labonte, car number 44, in fifth place. Richard Petty is sixth. Now here they go once again, as on the outside of the track, Earnhardt will try to reassert his car's advantage and press to the lead, and he does.
It almost is a repetition of the start of the race, with Earnhardt once again ahead, streaking away. But this time, very interesting, the advent of Darrell Waltrip, who we see running on the right of the screen in third place. The first time that we have seen the defending national stock car champion a real part of this race. Waltrip was back in 14th at one point early in the game with no speed at all. Suddenly he has found the speed. Obviously they have been working that Junior Johnson crew every time they have come into the pits to try to improve the car, and all of a sudden Waltrip has found the speed. You see him with Bill Elliott right behind him, and we're looking at second, third, and fourth as Waltrip, going into turn 3, tries to move up into second, tries to get inside of Harry Gant, who you see in the green car number 33.
It's interesting, Sam, to look at this sport from the long view of history. I think you can discern 3 distinct generations of drivers who have been dominant in the sport of stock car racing. The first generation, the pioneers, the Junior Johnsons and Lee Pettys and Buck Bakers and Fireball Roberts of the world. The second generation, the entrepreneurs who expanded opportunities for drivers, Richard Petty, David Pearson, Buddy Baker, Bobby Allison, Cale Yarborough. Now you have the young corporate stars like Elliott and Earnhardt and Labonte and Bodine and Neil Bonnet. And Darrell Waltrip doesn't really fit into any of the 3 categories. He's somewhere in between the entrepreneurs, Petty and Pearson and those guys, and the new corporate stars of the sport. But Darrell Waltrip has earned more money racing stock cars than any other driver, Richard Petty included. That is his distinction, and it's one I'm sure that he is quite comfortable with.
Yes, but he just dropped to place, didn't he, to Bill Elliott, one of your corporate men. I'm fascinated by that analysis, and I think it is very, very accurate. We now see Bill Elliott in third, right behind Harry Gant, and this high line that Darrell Waltrip is running is not paying off for him at all, and it makes me wonder why he has stuck with it through these laps. We saw him running well in third. He's now back to fifth, and it is seemingly because he's positioned his car badly on the road. Now, that obviously is not a driving error. It's a tactical thing that's going on, relates to how his car is handling, but it's still interesting to see it. Maybe he does not have the resurgent speed that I thought he had when we started talking about him 3 laps ago.
Meanwhile, you have watched Bill Elliott taking a significantly lower line on the racetrack and seeming to make headway with it.
You can see Dale Earnhardt ahead of them. He has not pulled decisively away. It's interesting, too, as you spoke of the different generations of NASCAR men, how many of these drivers are relatively old. I mean, for example, how about Harry Gant at 46? How about Parsons at 44? Yarborough at 45? Petty, Richard Petty at 48.
Well, my favorite line of the day is you said that A.J. Foyt is starting to get more serious about stock car racing. At age 51, is that any time to get more serious about any form of automobile racing? I know that A.J. is an extraordinary guy.
Well, A.J. has always said that if his eyesight began to go, he would retire from racing. And last year at Indianapolis, where eyesight is a very critical factor, he was worried about it a little bit. Some interviews that we had with him suggested that was on his mind. It is not nearly so critical in this form of the sport. As you can see, in fact, from the windshield of Jeff Bodine, you can't see where you're going half the time anyway. And he may be going to emphasize stock car racing now in his program at the expense of Indianapolis car racing.
You look at Bill Elliott in car number 9 as he attempts to draw a bead on Dale Earnhardt. There are mixed opinions on the question of whether or not there is pressure on Elliott in this race. He has not been extremely competitive in the first 3 races of this year. And some would say, well, that's okay. There are plenty more races to go in the season. But Bill Elliott created such extraordinary expectations for that car and for his racing a year ago early in the season when, in some instances, he was winning pole positions with qualifying speeds more than 1 mile per hour faster than all the other drivers, that you have to look at him and wonder, is he going to be satisfied with simply being competitive, or is Elliott going to try to push, particularly here at what he regards as his home track, to get back out on top and make a statement for himself. As he chases Dale Earnhardt, let's go down to Tim Brandt in the pits.
Okay, Jim Lampley, I'm in the pit area of Richard Petty. I'm with his chief, Dale Inman. Now, Dale, when he came in last time for that pit stop, you were visibly upset. He didn't get out quickly. What happened?
Well, he stalled the engine, but he was wanting his windshield clean. We didn't get it very clean, and he stalled the engine, but the car's not working real good right now. We got to do something about that.
What are the problems? What does Richard tell you the problem is?
Well, we've been loose about all day, and we're trying to get that tightened up, but this set of tires not working to get us the last set, so we got to hope we can get a caution and get that straightened out.
Okay, thank you, Dale. There again, of course, Jim, is what we were talking about, the circumference of these tires. They continually try to find the right set of tires for these automobiles. He said it's loose. That means it's moving around. The push condition that the General Motors cars really have is what usually makes them go straight and tries to make them go straight. But he says right now he's got a bad, loose condition down here with Richard Petty.
All right, Tim, and the man you were just talking to, Dale Inman, is the cousin of Richard Petty, who is now running in 7th place. Back with Richard after a 5-year absence, as Richard is really trying at this point in his career, Sam, to put together the kind of continuity, the kind of togetherness that he had in the racing team, which was such a factor in the sport in the middle to late 70s.
To recapture the old magic in effect. Now, the gap between Earnhardt in the lead and Elliott in second has been shrinking. And earlier, Jim, you were talking about the pressure on Bill Elliott. I'll tell you, there's enormous pressure on Bill Elliott. If there's nobody in the world is bringing pressure on him except himself. He is so oriented toward goals and toward success that he puts ungodly pressure on himself. So you know he means to win this race. It's very important. Here's a race he won twice last year. Invincible here, and I think if he was shut down badly, I don't mean if he got a second or third or something, that would be excellent, but if he was humiliated here, I think it could upset the psychological balance of the team. However, he's having an excellent showing, his best of the year so far, and he's got to be greatly encouraged.
All right, now let's go down to our other pit reporter, Al Troutwig, with the Kyle Petty operation.
All right, Jim, here is why we had the yellow flag just a few minutes ago. The hole in the tire of Kyle Petty, and the tire is so hot right now I can barely touch it. You can see if we come up to the car that there is a tremendous amount of damage on the rear end of the car. Now, Kyle Petty is still in the car. Kyle, are you okay? Kyle? Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm all right.
What happened?
I cut a left rear tire. About the time I crossed the start-finish line, I cut a rear tire. I think it's the left rear, but the car just bobbed and weaved a little bit. When I went down the corner, the car never took a step, and it spun around on me, and I got in the wall. I thought I could keep it out of the wall, but I didn't.
Okay, Kyle Petty with some lonely moments. Interesting, Jim, he benefited from a crash just a few days ago, and now he's the victim of one. Back to you.
That's right, Al Troutwig. Kyle was in 5th place on that last lap in Richmond when a crash propelled him into 1st place in his first win. Let's take another look at what happened here in turn 2.
Well, now, with this additional information, it's obvious that that spin started because one of the rear tires had gone on him. It's nice to think that it wasn't a driving error by a man I regard as one of the really promising men on the scene. And as many times as you may have heard the name Kyle Petty, remember, he is only 25, so he's been around a long time, but we hope he has an enormous future.
He is the son, of course, of Richard Petty, and this is a sport in which family operations are quite numerous. You were talking about the pressure that Bill Elliott places upon himself. His chief mechanic, the man most responsible for setting up the car, is his brother, Ernie Elliott. Do you think it's more difficult to argue with your brother about the setup of a car when you come in off the track than it might be to argue for just a hired hand?
Well, you see, I think that's part of what the Elliott magic was last year. Everybody wondered, well, is it the Ford Thunderbird aerodynamics? Is it something secret they're doing that nobody else knows anything about? But it may very well have been that unspoken cooperation and love between brothers. I mean, it has been a team effort. They've all shared in the successes equally, and I think that unique bond helped them considerably. But as anybody who's ever been in a situation like that well knows, success can sometimes, ironically, spoil the brew, you know what I mean. And I don't think that's happened here, and I certainly hope it hasn't. But where egos are at stake and as much money and fame and prestige is at stake as is in NASCAR racing, anything can happen.
Right now, Bill Elliott is either satisfied to run in second place or is being relegated to it by a superior Dale Earnhardt car. The two cars running relatively free of traffic at the head of the pack right now. But if, in fact, they do begin to lap trailing cars, Dale Earnhardt is one driver who knows how to use trailing traffic to his advantage and likes to do it, as he told us earlier.
Well, you're always thinking that later in the stages of the race. If it's a close race, you're racing somebody close and you see some traffic up ahead and you know it's going to come down to the last lap or the next to the last lap, you try to use it if you can in a safe way, or, you know, a manner that's not going to get them in trouble or you either one. But traffic does play a big part in races, and, you know, hopefully you come down and racing clean and not worry about traffic. But when traffic's there, you've got to race, you know, judge for it and calculate for it, and if it can help you or it can hurt you a lot of times, hopefully it'll help you and you can win the race by it. But I like to go out and beat a guy and win the race just outright.
Right now, he appears capable of doing that if things hold up. We are very close to the halfway point of this race. Not as significant a factor as it might have been 20 minutes ago when it appeared that rain was impending here. Now the rain cloud has blown on to the north and to the east, and it does not appear for the moment as though rain is a threat anymore. So for Dale Earnhardt, just 250 some odd miles yet to go in a race in which he has so far led most of the way, the Atlanta 500.
Moves outside of Trevor Boys there. You know, an interesting thing about Dale Earnhardt is that he drives with very, very thin-soled shoes so that he has a better feel, he tells me, for the throttle opening and closing. Now, these cars are very, very hot down around the pedal area. Dale Earnhardt, as I said once and will say, I hope many more times, is a tough cookie. And he'd rather have that feel of the throttle and not worry so much about his hot feet. Anyway, his hobby in between racing is going fishing, and I guess he has plenty of time to put his feet in a cool stream while he fishes for some trout.
Earnhardt's car is owned by Richard Childress, himself a former driver and one of the great veterans of this sport, both on and off the track. They look good right now, leading on lap 156. With still a long way to go. Live in Atlanta, where the standings remain as they were before we went to commercial. Earnhardt, Elliott, Harry Gant, Morgan Shepherd, Darrell Waltrip, Terry Labonte, and Tim Richmond, the leaders in the Atlanta 500. Incidentally, next Saturday on ABC Sports, first the Professional Bowlers Tour live at 3 o'clock Eastern Time, a bonus event with a $150,000 jackpot. Two bowlers can clinch $50,000 bonuses if either of them wins next week. Plus, at immediately following 4:30 Eastern Time, ABC's Wide World of Sports, the WBA Cruiserweight Championship, Dwight Muhammad Huawei, whom you may remember from his past as Dwight Braxton, against once heavyweight champion of the world, Leon Spinks, now fighting for the WBA Cruiserweight Championship. Another halftime score from the NCAA basketball tournament. There's the other Cinderella joining University of Arkansas Little Rock in that category, Cleveland State, the team which upended Indiana, tied with St. Joseph's 26 apiece at halftime in the NCAA regionals. Meanwhile, Dale Earnhardt continues on the lead. Bill Elliott, number 9, in second place. A year ago, Elliott won this race easily amid a streak of victories which made him the hottest driver on the stock car racing circuit in years. At that time, Elliott and his Ford were so clearly dominant that the other teams were scrambling to catch up. But now, 4 of the top 5 cars in the standings at this moment are General Motors cars. Only Bill Elliott's Ford among the contenders in a Ford chassis. And that has a great deal to do with the continuing engineering and design confrontation between General Motors and Ford, which has been the substance of so much discussion on the stock car racing circuit since the middle of last year.
Elliott is closing in a little bit, and I've been watching this with some care, and I think the explanation may be that his car is what they call in NASCAR terms loose. The tail end is sliding out a little bit more. That is an advantageous condition for the handling of a car on this particular track where the turns are so long. The car is, this of course is the kind of traffic that the leaders encounter, and here it isn't helping Earnhardt a bit. In fact, in that exchange, we see Bill Elliott able to move for the first time right to the rear bumper of Dale Earnhardt. Now, I think Earnhardt is suffering from what you call a pushing condition. In other words, the tail end of his car is not loose. It's not helping him around the track at all. And incidentally, we've passed the halfway point in the race now. We've got an official race.
Right on it, Sam. And when they complete this next lap, they will have completed the halfway point of the race.
Okay, excellent. So we're seeing two cars that handled a little bit differently, and it's a good matchup. And, okay, there it goes. It is halfway now. And let's go down to the pits where Timmy Brandt has a story.
Okay, I'm down here in the Darrell Waltrip area with Junior Johnson, the chief. And Darrell's car looks like it's running a little bit high. Why is that, Junior?
Well, it's real loose right now, and he's having to chase the back end up the hill. We'll keep, you know, changing the tire stagger and adjusting on it. We'll get it here before the day's over.
How far away are you? Is it getting better and better every time?
About 2 more adjustments, we should hit it. If we don't over-adjust it, we should be okay.
Still confident, though, I know.
Well, what happens, we've already been on both sides of the adjustment. We've had the car pushing, we got it loose right now. So when we go back, we'll stop, you know, where we think it should be.
Okay, Sam Posey, you mentioned he was a little bit high. Wasn't much Darrell could do, but there's the reason. It's running a little bit loose right now.
Yeah, but Tim, when Junior Johnson says they've been on both sides of the adjustment, that's like the gunnery officer on a battleship saying that he's been on both sides and he's got you bracketed. I would say from what we have just heard, thanks to your interview, that means bad news for everybody else, because when Darrell and Junior get things wired up, they go very, very fast around racetracks.
Right now, Waltrip is in 5th place. And you heard from Junior Johnson, once dubbed the last American hero and certainly one of the great folk heroes of stock car racing, as he continues to try to dial it in. We're deeper and deeper into the lexicon of the sport now, Sam. We have heard pushing, we have heard pulling, we've heard loose. Loose goes with pulling, pushing is tight. And here at Atlanta, it is regarded as an advantage to be set up a little bit on the loose side. You were getting into that just moments ago.
Well, exactly. But it's as simple as this. If you are going as hard as you can in a turn, and the car is wanting to slide, either the nose is going to slide first or the tail is going to slide first. It's as simple as that. Or, conceivably, under nearly perfect condition, the entire car would just work its way up the banking in a perfectly balanced drift. But it's called pushing if the nose goes up toward the wall. It's called a loose condition if the tail goes up the wall. And, of course, it was a loose, oversteering condition that was being described by Junior Johnson.
A sport of minutely calibrated adjustments, of sophisticated guesswork, moment by moment. For more of it, let's go down to Al Troutwig in the pits.
Jim, I just came from Dale Earnhardt's pit, where the pit crew there said that he was handling only normally in this kind of heat. Ernie, how is Bill's car holding up?
Well, everything seems to be okay right now. You know, you're just halfway through the race. So, you know, I think basically everybody's just trying to feel things out right now for the end of the race. You know, I'm sure Earnhardt's not running as hard as he can run. You know, if he's not, he's going to be tough at the end of the race.
So you're saving something for the end?
Well, I'm sure Earnhardt is.
Okay, that's Ernie Elliott, the pit crew chief of Bill Elliott's number 9, battling right now with Dale Earnhardt. Jim?
He's suspicious that Dale Earnhardt is saving something for the end. A year ago, all the other drivers were trying to figure out precisely what it was that Bill Elliott was saving when he was saving it. We mentioned the sophisticated guesswork. Much of the guesswork in last year's stock car racing scene was devoted to the question of what Elliott had that the other drivers didn't have. A few days ago, Bill Elliott revealed to us a little bit about that guesswork and the secrets which made him so successful.
You know, that happens in this racing more than anybody realized. And the thing of it is, it's hard to keep any kind of secrets in this business. If you go out and you've got a particular product that works good on your car, and you try to keep it, you know, under wraps from everybody else, you can't do it. There's too many people that let's say if the company wants that product to be known, they're going to tell everybody else that you got the product, whether you got it or not. But, you know, that's the way this series usually goes.
That is a North Georgia accent as opposed to the South Georgia accent made popular across the country by President Jimmy Carter when he was in the White House. You can't do it, Sam.
Let me add a thing or two about secrecy, because it is a very big issue in NASCAR. If you travel to any of the team shops, you'll find the doors are locked. Security is very high. All right, that's fine. That's where you build a car and you do your engine work. When you come to the track, you've got to work on your car in a common garage with no walls between the bays. You are working literally cheek by jowl with the guys in the next team. So how do you maintain your secrecy then? And it's amazing some of the lengths that they'll go to. For example, they might, if they want to do something trick to the rear suspension, change the spring, or in some way change the shock absorber, they might create a diversion up at the front of the car, apparently dropping something or making an apparent adjustment to the front suspension, while one man, carefully choreographed, goes back there and makes the key change. So secrecy is a very big thing, and it takes another form, too, which is one of the reasons the cost of NASCAR racing has escalated so much. It takes the form of hiring key men away from other teams. A crew chief does well. He may very well have to be concerned that his second in command will be hired away to head up another team. So he may be reluctant to tell his second in command everything he really knows. And that's one reason the Elliots, of course, have been able to keep such a cloak of secrecy around their team, because it's a family operation and nobody's leaving it.
For the moment, lurking back in 13th place, and certainly not by choice, but of unfortunate necessity, is number 28, Cale Yarborough. And here is a look inside Cale's car with our race cam.
Cale Yarborough going through turn 2. You see how steeply banked the curves are. That's Terry Labonte in the blue car right in front of him. Labonte, the winner of the last race just a couple of weeks ago. You see the instruments in front of Cale that are giving him the vital signs of the car. He drives with power steering, incidentally. There's a look out the front. You can see some shadows starting across the track. Now it looks as if Cale is well positioned to move inside of Labonte. Notice the tachometer there. That's his indication of how well he's going on the straight. They do not have a speedometer. Speed, after all, is important only in its relative sense here. To the right of that tachometer is his oil pressure gauge. To the right of that, his oil temperature gauge. I can't see from here what they are reading, but I do see his fuel pressure gauge, which is reading, in effect, full. It measures the pressure left in the tank. It's only when the needle starts to fluctuate that he knows he's in trouble. He's got the water temperature gauge over to the left of the tank. How often does he look at this stuff? You can see it right there. He doesn't look at it really all that often, except under a yellow. Now, as we look over here, do you see the 3 red marks just under and to the left of where it says Cale? Those are spare sticks of chewing gum that he carries. But he won't reach for them now, of course. Again, only under a yellow.
Well, those are more important on a hotter day than this. For the moment, the temperature is still hovering right at around 70 degrees, which is remarkably comfortable weather.
That may be
to what the riders are used to on the NASCAR circuit.
That may be, but he started with 5 sticks and is down to 3. You see, he's pacing himself through this 500-mile race.
I can't resist them either. This is the 4th race on the stock car racing circuit in 1986. Cale Yarborough does not yet have a top 5 finish this year. He and his crew are hoping to get that Ford into better working condition as the circuit goes on. The Daytona 500 was won by Jeff Bodine. That man, number 3, Dale Earnhardt, ran out of gas when he was apparently in position in the closing laps to try to slingshot by Bodine. Then a 400-mile race in Richmond won by Kyle Petty when Earnhardt was alleged to have parked Darrell Waltrip, as they call it in this sport, in the closing laps of the race. And then 2 weeks ago, a race in Rockingham, North Carolina, over 500 miles, won by Terry Labonte, who won the pole and the race, first to do it in 1986. One man who's been lurking near victory in all 3 of those races, Darrell Waltrip, was 3rd at Daytona, 5th at Richmond, and was 5th again at Rockingham, and may be in a position to break through today. Earlier you heard Junior Johnson say that they were just about getting that car toward the kind of adjustment they wanted to run on this Atlanta track. But for now, it is Dale Earnhardt still in the lead, as we are now well past the halfway point in this 500-mile race.
The chassis adjustments, you see the gap there between the leader. Elliott, who was able to close up earlier on Earnhardt, has not been able to stay with him. He's dropped back slowly. And one of the things that has been hampering slightly the chassis adjustment as the race has gone on is that a rules change has permitted the rear quarter panel windows, and you see it just behind where the yellow stripe stops on Earnhardt's car. There's a small window there. They're now allowed to fill those windows with plexiglass, which you didn't used to be allowed to do. It improves the aerodynamics fractionally, but it means that when the man wants to adjust the rear suspension and he dives into the back of the car with a wrench, it's much harder for him to make that adjustment than it used to be.
Just been told that car number 81, driven by Chet Phillip, has blown an engine. And right now, we are going to go down for another report from the pits.
Jim Lampley, I am standing in the pit area of car number 47, being Morgan Shepherd. He's running one whale of a race today. The interesting story here is that Morgan Shepherd's car is unsponsored, and in this sport which relies so heavily on sponsors, it is very, very unusual. Unlike Richard Petty's crew over here that all has uniforms with all kinds of people standing around, some seemingly doing not much. Here in this area of Morgan Shepherd, there is not a large crowd. There are no uniforms, but this has probably perhaps one of the best crew chiefs around, that being Jack Elder, and he is known throughout the NASCAR circuit as being a tremendous pit chief. They also have an owner named Jake Beebe, and his job is he owns a chain of school buses up in Connecticut. But unsponsored nonetheless, they're running extremely well right now in the third spot. It is quiet here in the pits. They just have not had many problems. Jimmy?
All right, thank you, Tim. He referred to the man who cruised that car, Jake Elder, also known within the sport as Suitcase, because he has worked for various different top teams in his long and storied career. Morgan Shepherd still trying to stay in the hunt. And he is doing so for now. But the leader remains Dale Earnhardt ahead of Bill Elliott after lap 183 of the Atlanta 500. He returned to Atlanta very close to the 300-mile mark, I should say, in this 500-mile race. The leader remains Dale Earnhardt. Earnhardt, the flagship car for the General Motors effort to compete with Bill Elliott's Ford. And there is car number 17, which has a problem. Doug Heverson going to the inside of the track. Doug Heveron, I should say. Switching to the inside of the track there, and smoke emerging from the engine.
Blew the engine, no question about it. When smoke comes out from underneath the cowl like that, you know that it's the engine that's gone. Of course, it'll bring out the yellow flag, which will have some more statistical and strategic implications.
In the parlance of the sport, as the good old boys are sometimes wont to say, he blowed the engine there. That's right. Now, we talked before the race about the confrontation between General Motors, currently on the lead in the form of Dale Earnhardt Chevrolet, and the Ford with Bill Elliott behind the wheel. How is that confrontation shaping up to now?
It couldn't be working out better, could it, really, for those people who write the rules and try to establish parity between the different types of cars, or for the people that promote this kind of race, because there are legions of fans for the Ford of Bill Elliott, and there are legions of fans for the Chevrolet of Dale Earnhardt. And as we see them going back and forth and their fortunes changing, ebbing and flowing down here, we can see the reaction from the crowd. Dale Earnhardt, of course, representing the General Motors, the Chevrolet body car. We see him in the pits here with one of the best pit crews in the business, the Richard Childress pit crew. We see them changing the outside tires and refueling. I look for it to be about 15 seconds. And now they're starting to be, no, they're going to do the inside tires as well. So because of the yellow, they've got plenty of time, and they would probably now know that they won't have to change the inside tires again before the end of the race. So
there had been, for 2 races, a rule limiting tire changes to only 2 tires at a time. But for this race, they are being allowed to change all 4 at the same time. And now Bill Elliott goes out of the pits right behind Dale Earnhardt. So the leaders are going back out onto the track during the yellow flag.
Yeah, they rescinded that tire rule, and as we saw Bill Elliott's pit stop at the latter stages there, it's obvious that he did exactly the same thing that Dale Earnhardt did. So our 2 heavyweight contenders, to put it in a kind of fighting mode, have both done exactly the same things during their pit stop.
You spoke about the Ford versus General Motors confrontation. In the context of this track, it is worth pointing out as we look at Morgan Shepherd in a General Motors car that drivers have said this is a track where Fords have done particularly well in the past. Is there enough continuity in the design and the aerodynamics and the operation of the cars over the long course of years that it's in any way valid to say that one course favors Fords over Chevrolets, so to speak?
It's a great question, and I'm not sure there is a correct answer, but let's take the supposition that, yes, there is enough continuity to establish that theory. Why, then, has the Ford been more successful here? A couple of reasons. First, the Ford engine has a broader power range than the Chevrolet, or has historically had a broader power range. And this track, with its long turns and fairly high speed differentials between the fastest that you go and the slowest that you go, allows that broad base power of the Ford to pull it out of the slow part of the turn and out onto the straight. So the engine is one reason. The other reason is that this track traditionally has changed in character a lot during the race, become oilier, greasier, and so on. And it seems that there's something about the Thunderbird, especially, that adapts to changing track conditions a little bit better than the Chevrolet.
All right, if you're a casual fan of the sport, as you watch these cars under the yellow flag, one man whose face may be relatively new to you, 44-year-old Morgan Shepherd of Conover, North Carolina. I am told that he has a fascinating pet, and I'm going to learn about it with you now as Morgan tells us about his pet.
Yeah, her name's Bobby, and she's a raccoon, and she's just a sweetheart. We've raised a couple of them, and Bobby's so much better than the other raccoon, which was Bandit. She's just real good-natured, and we have a lot of fun out of her. We sit at home, and we get our animals, our dogs and cats, and the raccoon out and let them all play, and, you know, it's better than watching TV, except for when it's racing.
That, incidentally, was a particular kind of Piedmont, North Carolina accent. And you may say to me, Sam, as a New Englander, that you don't think there was a lot of difference between that and what you heard out of the mouth of Bill Elliott, but any Southerner can tell you that there is.
I would not challenge you on these grounds at all.
Dale Earnhardt is the leader on lap 191 of 328 laps in the Atlanta 500. Bill Elliott in second place. Nothing could be more poetic at this stage of development in stock car racing than for the race to narrow down to a battle between those two, but there is certainly still a long way to go, and Morgan Shepherd could contend. So could Terry Labonte, who is looking for his second straight win. And so, of course, could the King, Richard Petty, winless since July of '84. Continue under the yellow flag occasioned by the blown engine of Heveron here at Atlanta. Earnhardt, Elliott, Shepherd, and Waltrip are the leaders as they stay in position right now under the yellow. Those of you who are joining us late, another look at NCAA basketball tournament scores. Alabama shading Illinois, so the Crimson Tide will move on. Navy with the upset of the day, knocking off Syracuse in the Carrier Dome in Syracuse. What a shock that must have been to the Orange fans. David Robinson, the brilliant Navy center, 35 points, 9 rebounds, 8 blocked shots. You want to keep your eye on one player who could emerge and make a real splash unexpectedly in the tournament. He just may be the one to watch. Some people regard him as the very best collegiate center in the country, even better than Dougherty of North Carolina and Tarpley of Michigan, who have gotten most of the attention during the course of the year, along, of course, with Bedford of Memphis State, who is no longer in the tournament after yesterday's loss to LSU. And now, let's return to what's happening here on the track in Atlanta and go down to Al Trautwig in the pits.
Jim, what is developing here is a situation where the winner today may be the gambler. We have just passed the 191st complete lap. Now, on the average, the cars are going 60 laps on a full tank of gas. So 2 more full tanks will bring us to lap number 311. You need 328 to win the Atlanta 500. So that means you're either going to have to gamble or you're going to need plenty of laps under yellow in which to save gas. So what comes out of here today is all important. And the team that decides to perhaps go for it late in the race may just have enough fumes to carry them across the line. Back to you.
That will be something which we will continue to watch. Remember, of course, in case you've joined us late, the man who is leading, Dale Earnhardt, appeared to be in position 1 month ago today to win the Daytona 500 at Daytona Beach and ran out of gas in the closing laps when he was in second place and in a position apparently to try to slingshot by the leader, Jeff Bodine. That is Earnhardt's car on the outside of the formation next to the wall there, car number 3. He continues as the leader in this race.
What you do in the pits when you come in for fuel, what you do to the car in terms of the setup is an outgrowth in some ways of the philosophy of your crew chief, whether he's a gambling man, a guy that likes to play it safe. Certainly when Earnhardt ran out of gas, they were gambling, no question about it, and that is the kind of attitude that they have.
And incidentally, during that long yellow flag, Harry Gant, whom you have seen leading the race on a couple of occasions, was in the pits having a rear axle problem worked on, and Gant is now at least 2 laps down as he moves back out onto the course. So it will be very difficult for Gant to appear among the leaders again. He just may have run afoul of a rear axle problem. They are under the green now, and Earnhardt is still in the lead.
Although it is Benny Parsons in the black car that we would see if we pan slightly to the left. It is Benny Parsons who's trying to unlap himself and is showing tremendous speed as this green came out. He got quite a jump on Dale Earnhardt. Once again, Bill Elliott has taken up station right behind Dale Earnhardt. So the 2 leaders must ignore Gant to the left. He is...
Parsons, you mean?
Parsons, I'm sorry, almost a lap back.
Just to clarify, if Earnhardt goes by Parsons, he is then exactly 1 lap behind. For the moment, Parsons is avoiding that fate. Earnhardt is allowing Bill Elliott to suck right up to the back bumper again. And now Elliott is moving to the inside and trying to go by. Bill Elliott is trying to take the lead on lap 198 with still 130 laps to go, and he didn't get by. I'm not sure he really wanted it.
Well, he came from quite far back. I'd say that he can count that last lap to be a great success. He, remember, we've just seen a rash of pit stops. So the cars, although they look the same from the outside, have been altered mechanically in subtle ways. Different tires are on both those lead cars. Possibly suspension changes have been made as well. So we are not seeing quite the same balance in those 2 cars, and it would look right off the bat here, wouldn't you agree, that the Elliott car has picked up a little more aggressiveness?
Certainly does look better than prior to that last pit stop. And now we are timing a Dale Earnhardt lap. The average speed for the race, because of the 2 long yellows, has now been dropped down below 140 miles per hour, which was Elliott's average in winning the race 1 year ago. We will time this lap and try to gauge an average speed off of what we see for the number 3 car. Dale Earnhardt, which passes by the flag at 33.7 seconds. Let's call that 163 miles per hour.
Which has been right in the range of each of the laps that we have timed. So, I mean, the average speed of the entire race, obviously, is a reflection of time in the pits and time spent under the yellow. But the true speed average while they're running is just over 160. When you consider that the fastest time in qualifying was 170, it's just 6 miles an hour less. That, given the traffic and everything, is quite an extraordinarily fast pace.
You made a rather interesting point to me here yesterday in discussing the handling of cars on this track, which is that they actually do use the brakes. Somewhat of a rarity in superspeedway racing.
Yeah, they do. That's what makes this track, I think, so fascinating, because it really isn't exactly a super speedway in the sense of Talladega or Daytona. They brake as they go into the turn. Now, the maneuver is with the left foot. You keep the power on with the throttle. You back out of the throttle a little bit. You left foot brake, grazing the brake. It helps to stabilize the car. I'll tell you where that would happen. It'd be right in about here that they would brake, and then by there, they're right all the way back on the throttle. But there's a period of 4 seconds, 3 to 4 seconds going into each turn where the car is definitely not at full speed.
I can't help but chuckle at the notion of 1 foot on the brake and 1 foot on the accelerator, since I can distinctly remember my high school driving teacher telling me that it was exactly the wrong thing to do.
Of course, the reason for that is you don't want the engine revs to fall. You want to keep the engine under load so that when you do come back into the throttle, it wouldn't misfire for a split second. You want to keep it running all the time. You might wonder, you know, we see Parsons there. Is he really holding up Earnhardt? Is he affecting the race? Well, the answer is absolutely not. I mean, he is trying to stay unlapped if he can do it, and this is quite fair. He's certainly able to keep a good pace, and if Earnhardt was all that much faster, he'd just whip right around him. No. Parsons, who incidentally, Benny is an ex-taxi driver, as we all well know, and you wouldn't think that somebody who had been in that profession would necessarily be as polite and gentlemanly as Benny is, but he is one of the true gentlemen of NASCAR racing.
The one black man, incidentally, ever to have been a regular in this sport, long ago veteran Wendell Scott, began as a taxi driver up in Danville, Virginia. And it's interesting to note that the second black man to enter the sport was expected to qualify here this weekend, Willie T. Ribbs, but did not make his much ballyhoo qualifying effort as his car was not readied and was not brought here from Charlotte, North Carolina. There are still many along the stock car racing circuit who eagerly await the emergence of Willie T. Ribbs when and if he makes his first appearance this year.
Could fuel already be an issue? Could Earnhardt, for example, be unwilling to go by Benny Parsons, even if he could? He's drafting him after all, which considerably reduces his fuel consumption. And if fuel is starting to be an issue, then all three of these men are thinking about that. And I think it's a big reason that maybe Elliott isn't making a move either.
They've slowed down to a little below 161 miles per hour, and you bring up an interesting point. Earnhardt has provided, if you follow the principles of drafting, a fuel consumption advantage for Bill Elliott for most of the last 100 laps. Could it be that Earnhardt is now seeking to gain exactly that kind of advantage by staying on the rear bumper of Benny Parsons?
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear that something like that is developing because with the speed, as you mentioned, Jim, dropping down, it's obvious that Earnhardt really could go by Parsons if he wanted. Now, we have from the pits a report from Al Troutwig. Al?
Well, Sam, if I pulled into the local gas station with a rear axle that looked like this, the guy would probably laugh me right out of town. But to Travis Carter and the Harry Gant pits, it only meant losing 2 laps, replacing this bent axle. He's back out on the track with a brand new one. Back to you.
That's quick work, isn't it? You'd be amazed at what these teams can do. You used to be allowed to change engines during the race, and it was possible for the top teams to change engines in about 14 minutes, if you can imagine that.
Incidentally, number 14, A.J. Foyt, has ducked into the pits for what is clearly an unscheduled pit stop.
We're seeing them, of course, change the outside tires, but I don't see them going under into the engine compartment, which makes you wonder why he stopped.
In case you're wondering, AJ's NASCAR racing car is sponsored and supported by the same group which puts him on the road at Indianapolis each year. Car number 12 is just coming in after having hit the wall.
That's Neil Bonnet, the teammate to Darrell Waltrip. And as we look down from here, you can see now the crew is almost blocking where the damage is, Jim, but it's all on the right side. He went out into the wall, and what they'll have to do, I don't think the car is seriously damaged, although they're looking in the cockpit for a reason I don't understand. They'll have to make sure that none of those fenders are rubbing on the tires.
Bonnet has not gotten a call among the leaders all day long, and in light of what he's accomplished through the course of his career, that's a bit of a surprise.
Right. Yeah, there's something more seriously wrong than just having smacked the wall there, because, oh yeah, there's no doubt that something is more serious than just that scrape into the wall. His crew looking very discouraged as they walk behind the wall. They're motioning there. I think Neil Bonnet, let's get back to that. They're motioning to one of the wreckers here. I'm not sure what's going on there. I'm not sure that Neil Bonnet is okay, completely okay. The yellow flag is being waved.
That's right. They are going back under the yellow. So Earnhardt will be able to relax on the lead for the time being. Obviously, the Bonnet car is stalled, and there's another look. Bobby Waywack has stalled out on the backstretch. So it is because of the Waywack stall that the yellow flag is coming out. Meanwhile, Bonnet's car is being rolled out of pit row and toward the garage.
All right, Bonnet is still in the car. We have no way of knowing exactly what is going on around that car, but an air of mystery definitely surrounds it as we see the leaders, certainly in the form of Dale Earnhardt here, Morgan Shepherd third in the screen, coming into the pits now.
So is Elliott. Elliott is in, Shepherd is in, Earnhardt is in. So all of the 3 top riders in the race, or drivers in the race, I should say, are in the pits at this moment. And we're under the yellow flag.
You see Bill Elliott on the top. These are the two leaders. Earnhardt on the bottom. You see different work being done. Elliott deciding to change once again the outside tires. You know what I think he did? I think he liked that setup we just saw. I think they took that set off, and we'll see those come back out for the dash to the finish. Bet you anything that's what we just saw. Earnhardt just went back out.
Meanwhile, Earnhardt getting out much more quickly than Elliott. There goes the Elliott car. Those two should remain at the front of the pack. Number 55, Benny Parsons, was able to make up his lap due to yellow. We'll be back with more exclusive coverage of Atlanta 500 after this word from our local station. We return, continuing under the caution flag at Atlanta International Raceway, where right now the key story surrounds veteran driver Neil Bonnet, 39 years old, from Hueytown, Alabama, consistent force on the circuit in recent years. There you see Bonnet being taken away from his car, which had hit the wall, on a stretcher. And our camera followed him away from the site as Bonnet, clearly quite conscious, but perhaps a bit shaken up, was taken away. And let's find out exactly to what extent, if any, he was hurt from Al Troutwig. Al?
Well, Jim, right now it's difficult to tell to what extent Neil Bonnet was hurt, but he was in a great deal of pain when they hauled him from his car. Right now he rests inside the medical center here at the Atlanta International Speedway. Evidently, his leg took quite a rap when he hit the wall. He doesn't know what it was, what the pain was. He said it felt like a very bad spasm, but I guess it's going to be the end of a day for Neil Bonnet, and perhaps a lot of looks by some doctors to determine to what extent the injury is. Back to you.
All right, so we will attempt to keep pace with Bonnet's situation, as right now the leaders remain on the track under the yellow flag. We're told that the yellow will extend for at least 2 more laps. At the moment, Morgan Shepherd, first out of the pits, has taken his position at the front of the pack. And the Atlanta 500, an ABC Sports exclusive, is being brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oil in easy-to-pour and resealable plastic bottles, and by Chevrolet, who invites you to drive today's Chevy, live today's Chevy. I'm Jim Lampley, along with Sam Posey, Al Troutwig, and Tim Brandt in the pits. The drivers will be seeing a green flag on their next trip around. 115 laps to go in the race. And to this point in the race, the most impressive car in terms of its performance has been that of Dale Earnhardt, the Chevrolet in which Earnhardt won the pole. But in the last 50 laps, Bill Elliott has begun to look spunkier and spunkier as Earnhardt's persistent shadow on the track.
Would you say that again, please?
Well, Morgan Shepherd is going to get an opportunity to take off with the lead when they go green this time. It'll be interesting to see when and if Earnhardt tries to get by Morgan Shepherd and reassume the lead.
This is Morgan Shepherd's best shot that we've seen yet. If he can make his car work out front, not drafting another car, this will be his best shot to pull away. However, shadowed that way with Earnhardt, it may be tough. Now, Cale Yarborough, number 28, you see on the right of the screen on the inside, he has been lapped. And as we see the restart, we're going to be in his cockpit. Now, they'll actually wave the flag very soon. As you can see, he's still in the turn, but he'll be looking up the track now to see them wave the flag, and they all accelerate simultaneously at that. There's the green flag. You heard the engine revs go up in Cale's car. He's going to, of course, try to make a move if he possibly can, but his car has not been handling that well. In fact, it's scraped up on the outside, the right-hand side. You see, we'll see the battle for the lead take place from inside Cale's car. There's Dale Earnhardt in the blue on the extreme right, and you see Morgan Shepherd working his way ahead of the car ahead of Cale and into the lead. Cale is staying, you might say, politely down out of the way if his car doesn't have the potential. You see him working the wheel there, and you see how much he's got that wheel turned. I think that his car is what they call pushing. It's not balanced the way he might want it to. I think that's evidence there that they haven't gotten it sorted out to his liking just yet.
One of the dramatic differences between stock car racing and some other forms of oval track racing is what you just saw right there. You can actually see the drivers turn the wheel and operate the automobile with the hands-on manipulation, which is more a part of this kind of racing than of some others.
That's Bobby Allison directly ahead of him in that car, number 22. Allison not having that great a day either. Now you can see just in the course of a lap since it's gone green how much Cale has dropped off the pace. In fact, he probably hasn't lost any positions. The cars that have gone by him were cars that were already ahead, had lapped him. But you can see now, if you look way up and you see Morgan Shepherd from inside, and you see Morgan there on the left, shadowed by Dale Earnhardt, you can see how much Cale lost right there at the restart in just one lap.
44-year-old Morgan Shepherd of Conover, North Carolina, the man who told you that he keeps a raccoon as a pet, finished 4th at Rockingham 2 weeks ago. Remember, 9 different drivers have won the last 9 NASCAR stock car races. Maybe Morgan Shepherd is due coming into this particular day. Right now, he leads Earnhardt, Waltrip, Tim Richmond back up among the leaders, Labonte, and Bill Elliott has dropped a little bit back.
You see the crowd here. Every seat seems to be filled. The bad weather didn't discourage anybody from coming. There's Waltrip on the inside in number 11 and Elliott going around him. So the report that Waltrip was starting to get a handle on the chassis and the way his car was in the turn, somewhat put to the test by Bill Elliott. Good racing on the lead. Earnhardt, of all drivers, is not afraid to run right absolutely on the rear bumper of the car in front of him.
In fact, that is a part of his unpopularity among some other drivers, is that they think that he is perhaps a bit too willing to put his car right on the rear bumper. What goes through the mind now of a Morgan Shepherd? Do you think that he takes time to focus on the fact that Earnhardt has a reputation for being reckless?
I don't think that Earnhardt, so to speak, you use the word reckless. I really wouldn't buy that. Let's say his aggressive temperament, that is not going to manifest itself on a track this fast where the risks are so high. It just isn't. The yellow has come out. We're looking, the leaders will be racing back to the line. That is the way the rules are written here. Number 74 has come into the pits. We're not sure exactly the cause of the yellow, but they are racing to the line.
A blown engine on the track. They now race back to the line. Shepherd is going to try to hold on to the lead, and he will. They establish position as they go by the line, and it will be Shepherd. I believe Earnhardt holds second place. That is Bodine on the inside of the track, and he has not been among the leaders. Elliott has come up into third place. It was Dave Marcus, number 71, who blew an engine out on the track.
Here is Marcus coming around, a veteran of many years who never really seems to have quite the right car underneath him. He's always the best of the second echelon.
Still waiting for the kind of breakthrough that Harry Gant experienced starting back in 1984 when he began to get the kind of equipment which would make him a competitive force in the top tier of drivers.
Now, here's Earnhardt, of course, coming into the pits. Bodine, Bill Elliott, Terry Labonte, Cale Yarborough, they're all streaming into the pits. It's interesting, isn't it? What a tactical game this is, because they were all in the pits a few laps ago. They did their best stuff then, but they're going to take another crack at it. Top that tank up a little bit more and give it another shot. Shepherd is still on the track. He may have decided to stay out, A, because the pit lane was very congested, and B, because he knows the yellow will probably go 2 or 3 laps. It'll become interesting if he has stayed out throughout the entire yellow. That would be interesting.
We will keep an eye on that and on all other developments when we come back. To the yellow still, and there is the leaderboard. Morgan Shepherd on the lead. Tim Richmond now holds second place. Darrell Waltrip third. Earnhardt and Elliott, both of whom have pitted recently, are in 4th and 5th places, and Benny Parsons, who's been lingering near the front of the race all through the festivities here, is in 5th place. And one man who has not been as much of a factor as we might have expected is in 9th place. Daytona 500 champion Jeff Bodine. And again, we have permission from Bodine's group for Sam Posey to try to talk to him through the vehicle of our race cam.
Jeff, this is Sam Posey. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Sam.
Jeff, in the last few laps, we've had a couple of blown engines. What are the track conditions now? Is it very slippery?
Well, for me it is. It's almost slippery out here. Our car's been pretty loose all day long. We're trying to get it tightened up so we can get this lap back, but The track is pretty slippery. I'm surprised. Usually it stays a little better than what it's doing here, Sam, but everyone seems to be sliding around quite a bit. Well, I say hi to my wife back home, Matthew and Barry. Hope you feel better.
What steps are you taking to correct the condition of the oversteering, loose car that you have?
Well, we're trying to take some rear stagger out. That means reduce the size difference in the two rear tires, get it more equal. That will tighten it up. Plus, we put wedge into the car. We've tried to put a little more weight on the left rear tire and the right front tire to tighten the car up to make it drive a little bit better. It isn't driving too bad right now, but we just need to get back up front here and get our lap back.
At this stage, Jeff, do you get a little discouraged, a little dispirited because you're not on the lead lap, or are you still in a fighting mood?
I'm in a fighting mood. I get through this traffic right here. We'll try to get to the front.
Okay, thank you very much.
Jeff Bodine and the other drivers will get a green flag on the next lap, so they will be back going. And there you see Bodine waving through the windshield. I'm not sure what that signal is for.
He is signaling to the car ahead of him, though. And I'm not sure that was a polite gesture that we just saw.
It may, in fact, have been quite the opposite. Well, Bodine doesn't have that gentilic southern sensibility. Is that rarity in the sport, a man raised in the Northeast. Though I'm told he now lives in the grand community of Julian, North Carolina. That is Jody Ridley in the car just in front of his, recipient of whatever message it was he was trying to impart there.
All right, they are halfway through the last turn. As our wide view of the track shows us, they are about to take the green. In fact, the green has just been waved, and you see the pack accelerating.
So once again, Morgan Shepherd, for the second time today, will try to hold on to the lead as they come out of a yellow flag. Shepherd in car number 47. And just to the outside of him, I believe that is Tim Richmond in car number 25. Richmond qualified on the front row in the outside position next to Earnhardt, was a factor in the early laps. You'll recall that he lost a lap in his view, or the view of his crew at least, to a NASCAR scoring error in the view of NASCAR officials. And there's the smoke coming from behind the car of Richard Petty, and once again there is a blown engine on the track, and the yellow flag will come back out.
Remember that there's a race to the finish line. Morgan Shepherd leads it now, and you can see Tim Richmond right behind him. I don't think there'll be an exchange of that lead, although Shepherd is being menaced, no question about it, by Rusty Wallace, I believe. They're coming around. The yellow is waving. Obviously now they're going to very cautiously go into that first turn, because look at the oil. You can see some of what they call the speedy dry that they put out on the track. The track must be becoming extremely oily, and what this means, Jim, to me, is that anybody's plans that they might have had earlier for a setup, a chassis and tire combination for which to go for the flag in has been altered by the fact that the track has changed so much.
Well, now, I prematurely said that Petty's engine had blown. Certainly, it looked that way, but he is staying out on the track. Could it be that the power steering hose broke, and Richard is going to try to bring that baby in without power steering, which is quite a task for a man of any strength whatsoever?
A good theory, but I think it's worse than that.
Yeah, I think it's worse than that. All right, let's go down to Tim Brandt in the pits and see what we can learn from there.
All right, Jim Lampley, we've had a couple of blown engines here today. Can you imagine what that does to the leaders as they go around? And this is part of a blown engine that we picked up the track from yesterday. That's part of the reasons for the elongated yellows. They're trying to clear the tracks as they go around to find pieces like this. Now, Richard Petty is right behind us if we can turn around. And Richard Petty, they're working under his hood, one of the better crews as well. It is a power steering problem, as you had talked about earlier, Sam. Let me also mention, as you watch them work on Richard's car, that Morgan Shepherd under that last yellow did not come in. We talked to his crew chief, and Jack Elder told us that the car is just running so well that they wanted to stay out on the track. They didn't even want to come in and take it, which is extremely unusual. Sam, as you know, a bit of bravado as we come down to the wire, and Richard Petty is on the way. Jimmy?
There goes number 43 again. I get 1 point for the power steering hose.
Boy, you sure do. That was an excellent call.
And I am told that Petty has gotten out of the pits and back onto the track rapidly enough to remain on the lead lap, but not necessarily among the leaders. And as the closing stages of the race come upon us, we'll begin to watch more and more for the careful drafting tactics, which are so much a part of the strategy of this sport. Earlier, Sam Posey helped us to put together a piece which explains the technique of drafting.
When you're drafting another car, you're following behind it, letting it push the air out of the way for you. You can feel the effects from 8 to 10 car lengths back. It's almost as if you suddenly had a little extra horsepower, or as if your car was running slightly downhill. The closer you get, the more the effect. From 10 feet back, it almost feels as if you're running in a vacuum. You think you're going to be sucked right into the guy's trunk. Here's what drafting looks like diagrammatically. The leading car breaks up the clean air and leaves in its wake disturbed, swirling air. The drafting car, coming up from behind, encounters reduced resistance and gains momentum as it comes in. You pull out into clean air, and if you've timed it right, you have enough momentum to slingshot by. Anyhow, that's the way it used to work until last year. Most cars had looked roughly like this, with notched back rear windows and squared-off trunks that made the air tumble behind them. You could catch a draft, as the saying goes, off one of these cars with ease. Then along came cars derived from the slippery shape of the Ford Thunderbird. A slight crown to the roof, a sloping rear window, and trunk significantly reduced turbulence and left the air behind the car much cleaner. Bill Elliott drove one of these, and much of his success on the faster tracks came because he was so hard to draft. Naturally, Ford's rivals fought back and produced a body shape that closely resembled the Thunderbird. The result is that drafting isn't what it used to be, and most drivers believe that that suction effect has been reduced by almost 1/3, and that when you pull out to slingshot around your rival, your momentum runs out at about his door handles. If there is any suction effect still left, it's right at the side of the car, very close to the body. So when you see drafting take place today, you see cars moving very, very close to the car that they're trying to overtake, and I think our race cam has already captured that on several instances.
Isn't this a good thing? Doesn't it now mean that a driver must make an honest pass based on horsepower rather than the previous pass, which was occasioned by aerodynamics?
Well, it was still a strategic element. I think the rules have just been reshuffled a little bit. But what it does mean is that you won't see people waiting for the last lap to take the lead. And we'll see that strategy play itself out here as they take the green flag to start again.
All right, here they go. The leader remains Morgan Shepherd as he takes the green flag. And the rest of those who have been in the hunt will line up now in a pecking order behind him to try to make their moves. Morgan Shepherd in car number 47 never has won a super speedway event and is hoping to break that particular maiden here today.
The car that is a lap down, that is on the left of your screen, is Rusty Wallace, who we spoke of earlier, who had his major success in his racing career here at this track back in the spring of 1980, and who has not been in the top 4 or 5 since he took that second place here 6 years ago.
What a great name for a stock car racer. The sport would lack a little bit if there weren't at least one Rusty out there. In fact, you look at Bill Elliott and that thatch of red hair, and you wonder how it is that he managed to make it through 30 years of life without ever having been nicknamed Rusty. Suspicion tells me perhaps as a boy somewhere along there he was.
Well, one thing about Bill Elliott, remember, he wasn't in the public eye until relatively late in the game. He didn't set out to be a stock car driver at all. So a lot of the press and the kind of appellations that get attached to you, it never happened to him.
But it certainly happened with a vengeance in the past year when he became the cause célèbre of this sport and got as much media attention as probably all of the other drivers combined in calendar 1985. He is even now continuing to respond to that particular change in his life. As you look at Dale Earnhardt now pressing up on the rear bumper of Jeff Bodine. And there is a good look from the race cam in Bodine's car at Earnhardt trying to go by on the inside.
And this puts Bodine back a lap. For a a while there on the restart, he was able to stay ahead of Earnhardt and thus be on the same lap. Had the yellow flag come out any time over the last minute or so, then Bodine could have made up that lap. So you know that Bodine is feeling very discouraged now. The view that we saw through his windshield is the view of a man that is disappointed. He is now a lap back. Tactically, he's in deep trouble. And similarly, you can imagine the satisfaction, by the way, for Earnhardt, who, of course, was defeated by Bodine in Daytona. He's sort of getting in his last legs.
A 500-mile race is made up of thousands of little mini races within the race. In that one brief one, Earnhardt, as you suggested, Sam, certainly got a measure of satisfaction at the expense of Jeff Bodine.
Thousands of mini races, as you say, and thousands of decisions. And in retrospect, only one or two of those will loom up as having been really, truly critical. And we are getting to that time. That's Morgan Shepherd's wife. She is enthused, Jim, there's no question about it. But we are getting to that time in the race where those small decisions are the critical ones.
Out on the track, her husband, Morgan Shepherd, is traveling at just above 163 miles per hour on each lap around this super speedway track. I'm measuring it now at exactly 162.81. That's the product of a 33.61 lap. We now have, as you saw from our graphic a few moments ago, fewer than 100 laps to go. So fewer than 150 miles to go, and we are getting down to the crunch. Anything past 400 miles is the crunch because, theoretically, a driver who pits at somewhere around the 400-mile mark might be able to make it the rest of the way without another fuel stop. There are the two leaders. Shepherd still ahead of Earnhardt. And now let's go down to Tim Brandt, who is with Mrs. Morgan Shepherd.
Sanja Morgan is here with me, and every time they go by Jim Lampley, she is extremely excited, signaling to him. What was going through his mind last night? How was he acting last night, getting ready for this race?
Well, he thought he could run good. He said he thought he had the car set up right for the racetrack. So he was in a good frame of mind last night.
What would it mean for you all to win this race here in Atlanta?
Oh, it would mean a lot. It would mean we could get on the winner's circle for next year. That's about $10,000, $20,000. So that would help us a lot. It would mean a lot to the team.
You're sitting here charting these laps. He did not come in on that one yellow. What are you all most worried about here in the pit area?
He wanted to stay out because of the lap money. If he was leading on a certain lap, he could get $4,000 extra. So he wanted to stay out.
Looks like you all will need that money down the road here. Sanja's pregnant. Stop jumping around so much. Jimmy?
All right, Tim, and thanks for the medical advice. All you pregnant mothers out there, pay heed to what Brandt said. We mentioned, as Tim did earlier, the crew chief for Morgan Shepherd, Jake Elder. The man was quite literally one of the stars among mechanics in this sport when he was at the head of the Holman Moody Ford operation. 23 wins, or 28 wins, I should say, in the 2 years, 1968 and 1969. Jake Suitcase Elder, he's been around a lot of garages. It would not be a surprise based on his long record of success to see Morgan Shepherd win this race today, but it would be a surprise based on the driver's record because Morgan Shepherd has never won a super speedway event. Meanwhile, he continues to duel with a man who knows a lot about winning, Dale Earnhardt, in car number 3.
You know, when Sonia Shepherd told Tim that the Winner's Circle program that she referred to that you get involved with if you do win one of these major races was only worth $20,000, is worth somewhere between $200,000 and $300,000. It makes an enormous difference if you can be a winner of one of these races. And in a sense, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy because it's a chance for a team like Morgan Shepherd, which is ordinarily mired in with all the, you know, rest of the second line teams, suddenly to have that major injection of cash, and if they handle it right, then they can vault their way up and maybe have a crack at becoming one of the super teams.
There on the right of her screen, you see the 3rd and 4th place cars and the margin between Morgan Shepherd and Dale Earnhardt at the left of the screen, and the cars which are at the moment in 3rd and 4th place.
I believe, though, as we look for what you could, in a sense, call the battle for the lead, that Dale Earnhardt is holding back. I really believe that. I think he's drafting. He learned definitely some lessons at Daytona, and it's really Dale Earnhardt who's driving one of the most cautious races out there.
The third place car, the blue car toward the right of your screen, is Terry Labonte, and the fourth place car is number 25, Tim Richmond. And right now, Labonte begins to move up a little bit closer to Dale Earnhardt's bumper, and as he does, we visit Al Troutwig again.
All right, Jim, sitting in the car right here in a little bit of pain is Neil Bonnet. I'm just going to drop in here and see how the ankle is. Neil, I know your ankle's in a lot of pain. What are you going to do?
Well, I'm going on back to Birmingham and have it x-rayed over there. I can be home as quick as I can get into Atlanta probably. And he said it probably wasn't broken. It just cracked a bone in my foot.
What happened with the car?
I went down in the third turn, and just when I rolled out of the throttle, the right front tire exploded. And it went straight across into the fence. And, you know, I couldn't even get it slowed down. And the guy just told me that Goodyear said the thing blistered inside and the sidewall ruptured in it.
They did check the tire, and they didn't think there was any reason for the rupture. Is the track slippery?
Track's not too bad. It's in pretty decent shape. I don't know if I just had a flat or what, but it just exploded.
Okay, knowing you, you'll be back next week. Neil Bonnet on his way to Birmingham for an x-ray. Back to you, Jim.
Neil Bonnet, one of the well-known Alabama gang, along with the Allison brothers, Bobby and Donnie. And right now, the big development is that Tim Richmond, in car number 25, has passed Terry Labonte and moved back into third place. So Richmond, who has played possum through most of the middle stages of the race, may have something in reserve himself. He may have designs on the same thing, which is now lingering ahead in the visions of both Morgan Shepherd and Dale Earnhardt, the cars which are first and second for now.
Well, we've just timed one of the laps. Morgan Shepherd is running slower than he was earlier in the day and infinitely slower than Dale Earnhardt is capable of running, which supports my idea that Earnhardt is just hanging back there. I think Earnhardt might be the real possum here.
If he is a rather well-placed possum, as he is in second place behind Morgan Shepherd with 80 laps to go. That means just about 120 miles left in the race.
Too far to go without a fuel stop. Let me reiterate. We will see one more stop if the race goes to the finish without a caution. We may see many more stops, of course, if there are yellow flags. But at least one more will be required. And that one will be key. What they do will be key. Evidently, the track is not, I think, and I certainly wish Neil Bonnet the best, by the way. I think his assessment of the track may be correct. I think that the oil spill from the blown engine was down lower in the groove than the leaders seem to be running. It may not be the issue. I thought perhaps it was.
Rare is the skilled stock car racer who goes through an entire season without crashing. Tim Richmond, whom you see moving right up next to Dale Earnhardt now, is a man who has had that experience at the Daytona Speedway in Daytona Beach, Florida. A few days ago, as he prepared for this race, Tim Richmond reflected back on that crash at Daytona.
The crash, it cost Rick Hendricks some money, but it's been more positive than it has negative. I'm still fighting it as far as physically. You know, I'm still not right. It's been over a month now, or about a month, and I'm still fighting the physical effects, but the mental effect has been a positive one on me. You know, I know, you know, it's not a crash I want to go through again or anyone close to it, but I went through it. I knew that it could happen, but I'm still here, and, you know, I'm just, it's like, you know, what's it like going 200 miles an hour? People ask you that a lot, but you can't explain it. I can't explain this crash show, what it's like. And, you know, when you hit 200 miles an hour, it makes you feel like Gumby. I mean, just, you know, your brain's still there, but your body's, it's there, but it's not working anymore. So, you know, it's been all right. The crash was fine. I just physically hope I can get back as good. I know I will, but it's going to take a while to still get back where I was.
Well, he hurt his neck and his back, and it's an interesting old saw in racing that you're not really the complete driver mentally, Jim, until you've had a major accident like that and you really understand the consequences. And if you can come back and regain your mental toughness, it seems like you're tougher than ever. And I think Tim Richmond in some ways had kind of a golden career with things happening favorably without ever having any real setbacks. And I think this may have toughened him. He's driving an awfully good race today. He's fought back what at least his team believed was an unfair scoring situation, and he's now in contention again.
The four leaders are in a close, compact formation on the track. Morgan Shepherd, Tim Richmond, Terry Labonte, Earnhardt now back in fourth place, but they have been slowing down in the recent laps, lap by lap by lap, now down to something close to 159 miles per hour. And you'll recall that within the past 50 miles, Earnhardt has run laps at well over 163 miles per hour. There goes Tim Richmond on the inside, momentarily pressing his front bumper in front of the car of Morgan Shepherd. And now Richmond, sticking to the inside line, is apparently going to take over the lead, and he's got it.
And his car is oversteering. It is loose at the back. There's no question. We saw it there. And that is the condition that we've been describing all along as ideal. But look at Morgan Shepherd go very high. I don't believe he's making the car work up that high and fighting back. Look at that. There's Richmond sliding a little bit. This is a classic battle between these two men who do not seem to realize there's as much race left as there really is. Remember, there's got to be another pit stop, and yet they're racing now as if they were going at the end of the race for the checkered flag.
But they're doing this at just over 158 miles per hour, Sam. So unless something has happened to the handling of Earnhardt's car, you might suspect that he is watching this and enjoying it for fun at the moment. He's got a long way to go. He's got a car which has traveled much of the race at over 163. He is watching Richmond and Shepherd dice for the lead at about 158 and a half. And this could be an elaborate game at this point for Earnhardt. Now they're back up close to 160 miles an hour as Shepherd moves outside of Richmond once again.
Well, you're implying that these speeds are slow, but they're really not in the context of the cars that they're being forced to pass. In terms of their cornering potential, they are right on the limit. And if I seem to be a little bit excited, Jim, it's because when you see a car as loose as Richmond's is there, you sense the possibility for a crash. And I think that's what got me on the edge of my seat.
Tim Richmond, right on the rear bumper of Rusty Wallace, but in the lead in the Atlanta 500. We'll be back. We have got 68 laps to go in the Atlanta 500. That's just a little bit more than 100 miles left in the race. Tim Richmond is the leader for now, ahead of Morgan Shepherd, Terry Labonte, Dale Earnhardt, Bill Elliott, Darrell Waltrip, Benny Parsons. There are 8 cars on the lead lap. Obviously, any of those 8 must be considered potential contenders to win this race. But so far, the most impressive car throughout the course of the day seems to have been that of the man who won the pole here, Dale Earnhardt, car number 3. For now, however, Tim Richmond is flexing his muscles a bit on the lead as he puts a little distance between himself and Morgan Shepherd.
I don't think we can forget also the potential shown by Bill Elliott's car. I think Earnhardt and Elliott really, in a sense, showed equal potential, and I think it was a question of how much of that potential the individual driver chose to show more than anything else.
As they continue in that order, we take another look at scores from the NCAA basketball tournament. North Carolina State had to go to double overtime to eliminate Arkansas Little Rock. Kentucky defeating Western Kentucky. Kenny Skywalker from Roberta, Georgia, here in the state of Georgia, was the high scorer in that game. And the Cinderella team, which upended Indiana, has been beaten itself as St. Joseph now assumes the role of small name, big noise in the NCAA tournament.
Fourth turn action here, and you see a bunch of cars involved. We'll try to pick out for you who they are. The leaders are charging into this scene. You'll start to see them at the top of the screen. They are legally entitled to race to the yellow, but you'll see them pick their way through fairly carefully. There come the leaders. They're diving all over the place looking for room, and I think it was Tim Richmond that made it to the line first in that melee.
And I think that is the number 2 car of Kirk Bryant, which spun and is on the track there in the middle. Number 23, Michael Waltrip, appeared to hit the wall.
And there is Kirk Bryant's car. I think that makes the 3rd or 4th wreck that he has had. A 4th wreck in 4 races this year.
Got a perfect record.
A perfect record. 100%.
Well, if, as you say, a man's skill and determination are tempered by that experience.
Yeah. All right, let's have a look at this. It's number 2. Bryant spins. And you can see Waltrip, number 23, hitting the wall. That's, well, Darrell Waltrip's brother, and then he comes down and forces number 15, Ricky Rudd, into the wall down there on the right. So the typical kind of chain reaction that you get in NASCAR.
All right, now let's correct one NCAA basketball score while we may. Cinderella continues along her path. Cleveland State defeated St. Joseph's and not vice versa. So the Vikings have won for the second game in a row, and Coach Kevin Mackey continues his march through the NCAA tournament. And there, as you look at the car of Tim Richmond being worked on in the pits, the yellow flag is out again in Atlanta, and we'll be back live right after this. We are back and continuing under the yellow flag in the Atlanta 500. For the moment, the leader is that man, number 3, Dale Earnhardt. Moments ago, before the yellow came out, we told you that there were 8 cars on the lead lap. Tim Richmond was the leader at that time, ahead of Morgan Shepherd. Those cars have pitted. 1 lap now to go before the green flag as we go down to the pits and Tim Brand.
In Morgan Shepherd's pit with his pit chief, Jack Fletcher. And Jack, it's going to be close. Can you make it on this last fill-up?
Yes, we can make it all the way. We ran this far before, so we're confident we can make it.
I know ideally you'd like to go 60 to 70 miles before you fill up. Has he gone this distance? You've got 60-some laps left to go here.
Yes, we've done that. We did it earlier in the race.
All right. So they pitted that. Huh?
We were out when he came in.
All right. So they checked that before, Jim. They really feel that they can do it. They will do it. We have talked to Harry Hyde also and Tim Richmond's pit. They're going to try to go the distance on this last fill-up as well. So it's going to come right down to the wire. It'll be extremely close as to having enough gas or not going the distance.
All right, Tim. Well, that, in fact, is the crux of the matter. If you were NASCAR's paid dramatist, you could not have written this any better, because that last yellow came out with just about 100 miles to go in the race. And as we've told you before, the fuel limit for these racers is just about 100 miles. All eyes will be focused now, I suppose, Sam Posey, on Dale Earnhardt, who has run afoul of this particular situation once before this year.
Yeah, at Daytona, he couldn't make the distance that now remains to be made here. And he spent part of that time drafting Jeff Bodine and should have gotten good fuel mileage. Things may be different this time. Only time will tell. But it's interesting, in a race which went incident-free for so long, that suddenly there seems to be crash after crash, blown engine, and there may very well, if this trend continues, be another yellow flag before the end, rendering all of this academic. Pretty exciting stuff. You see Cale Yarborough, who's right with the leaders, although he is a lap back. There's Earnhardt on the right, cutting down in front of the car, in front of Cale. We have a good look at Earnhardt up ahead there as he starts to pull away from Cale, as he's been able to do each time so far. There's Rusty Wallace being passed. Cale Yarborough just not with the speed so far. Again, look up at the track. The view that Cale Yarborough sees, and you can see Dale Earnhardt able to cut down, take a very low line around the track. Earnhardt, wait a minute, the yellow has come out again. I'm afraid that was a prophecy. I see a car sitting on the inside of turn 4. It is again
54 is Slick Johnson, and 2 is Kirk Bryant again.
Again?
And now Bryant has body damage to go with his spectacular spinning.
Well, it looks like the back of his car is missing. That's where the fuel tank sits in these cars. That's interesting. Well, it'll bring another rash of stops, of course. And this time, I would suppose that it will be possible for virtually any of the cars to make it from here to the end. That incident appeared to have been triggered by a blown engine. Do you know who that was, Jim?
Well, it was car number 57.
Jody Ridley.
Blew an engine, and that is indeed Jody Ridley's car.
Yeah, I didn't see that, but let's see if we can have another look at the incident as the yellow flag waves. This is the turn 4 area. As we move in, we see...
That's Kirk Bryant, who spun.
No, Bryant is there in the number 2 car, right in the middle of it. There's Kyle Petty, who was involved in a crash early, number 7 just going out of the screen. So what we see there is Kirk Bryant and car number 54, Slick Johnson. Wow, Kirk Bryant. The spin occasions the yellow. People gather themselves back up, and he's involved in the very next incident.
The 2 cars which just missed being involved there, number 88, Buddy Baker, slipped by, and number 7, Kyle Petty, also just missed.
And people say maybe you don't have to have reflexes. That's where it comes in. Not only to react quickly to danger ahead of you on the track, but to do exactly the right thing. Buddy Baker, Kyle Petty, very fortunate but also very skilled drivers. We can't see whether the drivers are out of those cars, Kirk Bryant and Slick Johnson.
But you've already mentioned that this is the 5th crash that Kirk Bryant has been involved in 4 races. This is a tight-knit, hierarchical sport where the drivers like to keep a tight command over their perception of what's happening on the track at all times. Do you suspect that there will be a review of Kirk Bryant in the upcoming weeks?
Yeah.
There you go.
I would think so. On the other hand, Kirk Bryant has the advantage of driving for a car owner who I believe happens to be his father. So it's a little harder for him to lose his job than it is for the average guy.
Right now, we still await the emergence of 2 drivers from those 2 cars. We'll be looking for that when we come.
Here, technology can be fun. Down there, it's a different story. It's where General Motors tests AC Delco parts to make sure they deliver performance and reliability. AC Delco has a full line of parts for most any car or truck, from Delco batteries, Delco shocks, AC fire ring spark plugs, and AC filters. Help your car pass the test. Get the smart parts from AC Delco.
Call 800 AC Delco for a retailer near you.
And we continue to observe the proceedings surrounding the 2 cars which crashed. Number 2, Kirk Bryant. Number 57, the car of Slick Johnson. Now, while we were away in commercial, 1 driver was placed on a stretcher and put into the emergency vehicle, which you saw moving away from that spot. I don't want to hazard a guess as to whether that driver was Slick Johnson or Kirk Bryant. At this point, certainly we'll be finding out as soon as we can. But the yellow flag has occasioned another rash of pit stops, another chance for the lead drivers to begin to examine their situation with now just about 80 miles to go in the race.
All right, that 80 miles obviously means that if there are no more yellows, maybe there won't be, that none of the lead cars would have to stop for fuel. So whatever they did in this last pit stop, they certainly did with the idea that that was going to be their setup for the dash to the finish.
And the cars which have been in command through most of the day were those of Dale Earnhardt and Bill Elliott. Now, in recent laps, we have seen Morgan Shepherd and Tim Richmond both moving up to indeed dice the lead ahead of Elliott and Earnhardt. Have you seen anything to indicate to you that we are going to have a wide-open 4 or 5 car race toward the finish? Or do you still think that the 2 cars which dominated most of the early proceedings, Elliott and Earnhardt, are going to be the ones to watch?
I really don't have a call on it because the last 150 miles of this event have been so jumbled that we really haven't seen clear track running, which to me would have been decisive in any way and enable us to form any opinions. I still feel that Bill Elliott put those tires away earlier and may very well have what he regards as a good setup for his car. Now, at this point, he is, you know, in a good position if his car is handling well. On the other hand, we certainly saw Earnhardt with the power. I would tend to favor those guys who ran fast earlier when the track conditions were good, and I think that'll give us a hint.
Now, there's the driver who was placed in the emergency vehicle. You see him being taken out and wheeled away right now. Again, we didn't get a close enough look for me to hazard a guess as to whether that was Bryant or Johnson. 1 lap to go now before the green flag. Jeff Bodine is a lap down. The car on the outside, number 11, Darrell Waltrip, is the man who will now be in the lead when they resume racing under the green.
And of course it was Waltrip that we heard earlier from Junior Johnson that they figured they had things bracketed. Right behind him is Bill Elliott, and right behind Elliott is Morgan Shepherd, and right behind that is Dale Earnhardt. So I don't know. It's the big guns are loaded, let's put it that way. And we're going to see, we see Terry Labonte right behind Shepherd.
So actually Earnhardt is a little bit farther back.
Yes.
Because he is back in 5th place.
Or 6th.
6th, as a matter of fact.
Yeah,
that's
I was
right.
wrong
6th.
there, yes.
Because Benny Parsons is ahead of him in 5th place.
Yeah.
So just to recap one more time, it is Waltrip at the front of the pack, then Morgan Shepherd, then Labonte, then Parsons, then Dale Earnhardt, and then Tim Richmond. The deck having been shuffled on the one yellow flag at about 100 miles to go, and then reshuffled, and the card which comes to the top is the man who has been Mr. Consistency this year as well as in past years, Darrell Waltrip, car number 11, biggest money winner in the history of the sport.
But we have yet to see Waltrip actually show speed in this race. I mean, he may be about to do it, but so far we haven't seen that. We've seen it from Elliott, we've seen it from Earnhardt. Well, this is exciting, and it's an unusual number of cars which seem to have a real shot at the win. At this stage of a race, it's usually down to 2 or 3. We're really looking at 7 or 8, I would say.
53 laps to go, as we told you when we were on camera a moment ago, just exactly 80 miles or so.
And once again, 2 cars that are almost a lap down. Jeff Bodine, you see there, and Rusty Wallace. You see Rusty Wallace from Bodine's car. In fact, these 2 men, even though they are virtually a lap down, still have very much the speed of the leaders. There's the leader, Morgan Shepherd. There's Morgan Shepherd.
Well, in fact,
he is
Shepherd
the
is the leader because he has moved by Darrell Waltrip.
And right behind is Terry Labonte. Now, he's in the blue and white car that you see running 4th right there. It almost looks 3rd, but that's because 2 cars are superimposed on each other. Don't count Labonte out. He won the last race a couple of weeks ago. He's a former champion. There's Morgan Shepherd. It all looks so calm sometimes through these cameras. Of course, it's not calm there. There's Labonte. Good view of Labonte as the pack streams through turn 2.
And they're picking up speed again, Sam. They just ran a lap at well above 163 miles per hour. You take a look at Bill Elliott through the rearview mirror, and you are literally, through the vehicle of our race cam, right in amid the leaders in this race at this moment. Elliott, in effect, is in Jeff Bodine's rearview mirror. Our race cam swivels to take a direct look at him through the rear windshield. And right now, Elliott looks impatient in that position.
Yes, he does. Having been a driver, of course, for a great many years, this kind of thing gets me incredibly excited. I remember this sort of situation. You're trying to decide, as Jeff Bodine might, whether to block, how big a role to play in this thing. You're almost a lap down, and yet you're fighting, obviously, for your own interest. However, he does pull to the right, and Elliott takes the high groove and seems to be making it work up there.
Quite obviously, there are friendships and the opposite in a sport like this. Do drivers play favorites in a situation like this?
Yes, in the split-second decision-making to something like this, yes, they do. And I think Elliott, incidentally, is well-liked despite his dominance last year. He handled himself extremely well and didn't make any enemies in a year where he might, a lot of people were jealous of him. There's Labonte, but really Bill Elliott is much liked and greatly admired here.
There is Elliott.
You see the flapping of that protective netting that keeps the driver's head hopefully from coming out of the car in a crash. Boy, you were right there. See those tires spinning? See the crowd flashing by in the background. That's what 180 miles an hour or more looks like.
Well, that's the old 2x200 ventilation system that our earlier piece referred to, Sam. 2 open windows, 200 miles per hour.
Yeah, and believe me, the driver and the car are generating plenty of heat that needs to be dissipated by an air conditioning system. It's hot in those cars, and emotionally, of course, it's getting very hot now, too. The race cam showing Elliott now ahead of Jeff Bodine. We will see if Elliott, who took, about 3 laps, actually, to get clear of Bodine, can now set sail up the track.
There is the leader, Morgan Shepherd, who's now beginning to put a little bit of distance between himself and the rest of the pack. Could it be that on this day, Morgan Shepherd is going to become the 10th different man to win in the last 10 Grand National Stock Car races? Could it be that Morgan Shepherd, at age 44, is going to win his first super speedway race ever? Well, of course, doesn't look bad right now.
Well, one of the big factors is that one of the very fast cars on the track was Dale Earnhardt, and at the restart, he was mired back in the pack. That is slowing him up significantly, and the number of laps remaining may seem like a lot, but if Earnhardt is losing significant ground now, this may put paid to his chances.
All right, The leader is the car on the left of the screen, Morgan Shepherd in car number 47. In the middle of the screen, the blue car, which I believe is Rusty Wallace, is a lap down. He does not count among the leaders. Second place is the red car coming toward you right now, and that is Bill Elliott. There's quite a margin for this stage of the race between Morgan Shepherd and Bill Elliott.
Key moment for Bill Elliott. I wouldn't suspect he wants Morgan Shepherd to have that lead. I think Elliott, however, as we saw from our race camp, it took him so long to get around Jeff Bodine that, you know, the lead that Morgan Shepherd has was not a result of Shepherd's speed as much, and we see Elliott now powering right by Rusty Wallace with no problem and setting his sights on Morgan Shepherd. So I don't know. I think Shepherd's lead was fortuitous. Now, Timmy Brandt is down in the pits. Tim?
Sam, I'm with Sandra again down here in the Morgan Shepherd's pit. How is everything under control? You guys look like you're getting excited again.
Yeah, I think everything's going to be all right. If we can hold out for another 13 laps, we'll get another 4,000 for leading that lap.
Okay, now you've been charting these laps. Is he right on the game plan? Is he doing what he wants to do? He looks like he's starting to pull away a little bit now.
Exactly. He's doing exactly what he wants.
Okay, and just to update the accident that we had a little bit later, Slick Johnson and Kirk Bryant both were taken on stretchers. They are down in the medical center. We have just had that confirmed. We do not know the extent of the injuries, but we do know that both drivers were taken down into the medical center. Jimmy?
All right, thank you very much, Tim Brandt. Thanks specifically for bringing us up to date on Bryant and Johnson, the two drivers who are now in the medical center. Speed, they are traveling at close to 163 miles per hour. Standings at this moment, Morgan Shepherd, Bill Elliott, Tim Richmond, Terry Labonte. Earnhardt finds himself in 5th place. 42 laps to go.
But I hate to disagree with Morgan's wife, Sandra, because I think that Morgan, in fact, is not doing exactly what he wanted. I think he was, as I said, the beneficiary of the fact that Bill Elliott was delayed there behind Jeff Bodine, and now that Elliott is out in the clear, he is catching Morgan Shepherd, and he is doing it decisively. Now, the other car that we were interested in because of early demonstration of speed, of course, was Dale Earnhardt. He, too, has freed himself up from the earlier traffic and is on the move. So it's not over by any means, and the gap is being decreased steadily.
In fact, it looks to shape up as a sensational last 60 miles of racing here. Morgan Shepherd will be trying to hold off the competition and win a superspeedway event for the first time. Bill Elliott will be trying to reestablish the eminence and the prestige he accumulated in wholesale fashion 1 year ago when he won 11 Grand NASCAR superspeedway races. There are the crossed fingers in the pit of one Morgan Shepherd.
And the gap is down to just over half a second. Whatever happens today to Morgan Shepherd, it is a day he will not forget, and a day that he has distinguished himself. There, of course, is the rival pits, Ernie Elliott, the man who builds Bill Elliott's engine, his brother. Together, a brain trust, those two men, along with the rest of their family. This is the moment that they can put themselves back where they were last year, which was as the dominant force in NASCAR racing.
And you got the feeling toward the end of the week that they would specifically love to do it right here. Elliott, as we've told you so many times before, is from Dawsonville, Virginia, not too far away. He has had success on this track. In fact, won both the spring race, this one, and the other 500-mile race, which takes place here in the fall on this track a year ago.
And here, Elliott, it seems as if, Jim, each time they head into the turn, that's where Elliott makes his most ground. It's not on horsepower coming off the turn. It's not even on the steady state cornering once they've settled into the turn. It's right in there. He sweeps in on him. Different
characteristics. It is a track with more turns than straightaways, in effect. So you're quite happy to see that kind of progress if you're in Bill Elliott's position. 37 laps to go now.
And the gap down to less than a third of a second. You do not make up ground in big gobs. You make it up in hundredths of a second, here and there, and they add up. Still,
this is fairly dramatic.
Yeah, it is dramatic. Well, Shepherd is racking up quite a lot of prize money, as his wife points out along the way, by being the leader at different stages. And to a smallish team like his, that can make an enormous difference. Remember, tires cost a couple of $100 a piece, and if you can go to the next race and the next and know you can buy fresh tires and a new engine and all that kind of thing, you can get to be a force to be reckoned with.
And again, if you've just joined us, pit stops may not be a factor from here on in, barring a caution flag. All of the cars on the track should have sufficient fuel to make it to the checkered flag from here.
And we still have the rivalry between a General Motors car, which you see here, driven by Morgan Shepherd, and the Ford Thunderbird body car of Bill Elliott.
Quite correct. Morgan Shepherd's car is ostensibly a Buick LeSabre. Suffice it to say, it is one of the General Motors cars. Bill Elliott's car is ostensibly a Ford Thunderbird. Suffice it to say, it is, in the context of NASCAR racing right now, not just a Ford, but the Ford.
Right, and I think also, you know, when you say ostensibly, I believe a Buick LeSabre comes to those of us who might want to buy one in the showroom as a front-wheel drive car. Here, of course, it's rear-wheel drive in a completely different configuration. Only the body has even the slightest resemblance to the real thing, and all the General Motors cars, incidentally, use Chevrolet engines, so not even the engine is a Buick. But it's a wonderful racing car, isn't it?
They all are.
By any name, it is a wonderful racing car.
What an extraordinarily safe form of racing, given the speed. I mean, obviously, we think at this moment partially about Slick Johnson and Kirk Bryant and hope that they are okay. But this particular form of automobile racing, particularly given the speed, has an incredibly low serious injury rate.
Oh, yes. Compared to Indianapolis or Formula One racing, it's almost like a different sport. And here is the look at third, fourth, and fifth. And you can't forget this group. They're only about a second and a half back on the track. That's Richmond leading in that group. Labonte in the middle. And Dale Earnhardt, of course, throughout much of the race, it seemed like the toughest and strongest guy. He is third in that group and fifth in the standings right at this point.
So you have 5 drivers at the front, each of them capable of winning the race. Morgan Shepherd in first place, Bill Elliott in second place, Tim Richmond in third place, Terry Labonte in fourth place, and Dale Earnhardt in fifth. Not to mention Darrell Waltrip in sixth. We'll be back with more exclusive coverage of the Atlanta 500. We are down very close to 40 miles to go in the Atlanta 500. And the leader remains Morgan Shepherd, Bill Elliott, Tim Richmond, Terry Labonte, and Dale Earnhardt in fifth place. There is a look at Shepherd in the yellow and white car, number 47. We have told you several times before now, it's worth mentioning again, he's never won a super speedway stock car racing event. Elliott has won quite a number of them. Was in fact so far ahead of the field at this point a year ago that it was regarded as unseemly dominance of the sport. There is a good look at Morgan Shepherd and exactly what he looks like. Looks a bit younger than his 44 years as he stalks this elusive super speedway victory.
He is somebody that, despite what you could say was bad luck, he's had enormous skill for a number of years and never really had the great opportunity. He's never lost his spirit. He's remained a really nice guy, never became bitter about not getting the big chance. And it is delightful to see his success today.
Now we are being told there's a blown engine on the backstretch. And it is car number 28, Cale Yarborough.
Yep.
Well, there goes one of our race cams, and Cale's going to be out of there. They've been providing us with a terrific view of what's been going on the track, and there you see Cale wrestling with the thing.
I was trying to look and see if we could see the oil pressure gauge. That's a sure indication of how the engine is doing, and it would have been interesting to see the other gauges in there to get any idea. They did not go yellow. One car is being black flagged. I think it's Richard Petty, but they have not gone yellow because evidently Cale, with his experience, got that car pulled down so soon. Also, we are not certain that it was a blown engine for Cale. Could have been. You were right once, I will never disbelieve you again, no matter how esoteric the information.
Morgan Shepherd remains on the lead. As you pointed out, no yellow flag came out. 26 laps to go. That is under 40 miles.
And as you can see, the gap from the 2 leaders back to the pursuing trio, which contains Earnhardt, Labonte back there, and Tim Richmond, that's a big gap. At this point, 40 miles to go, none of those drivers are showing the kind of speed that would see them detach themselves from that situation. Let's look at that gap. There are the leaders, Morgan Shepherd, Bill Elliott, and now look back, really almost not quite a quarter of the racetrack, but that's a significant amount of asphalt that they're going to have to chew up. And at this point, there's no way they would be back there intentionally. However, the 3 pursuing cars have not been holding each other up. They're not slowing each other by cutting each other off in the turns or anything like that. They just don't seem to have the combination at this stage.
Well, you've got every kind of story here in the top 5. You've got Morgan Shepherd, who's never won. Behind him, you've got Bill Elliott, who has won a great deal, particularly within the last 2 years, but has not had success in recent weeks, and would love to recapture it here on what he regards as his home track. You've got Tim Richmond, who has not had a real good race this year. Best previous finish in 1986 was the 16th place, so he's really hungry for a high finish and perhaps a victory. You've got Terry Labonte, who won 2 weeks ago in Rockingham and is trying to break a streak which has seen 9 different drivers win the last 9 races. And of course, you have got number 3, Dale Earnhardt, who's had such a tumultuous month, ran out of gas while apparently threatening to win in the Daytona 500, crashed in the closing laps with Darrell Waltrip at Richmond, was fined by NASCAR after having been singled out as the culprit in that crash. All 5 of them still within range of a possible victory here in the Daytona 500. And now let's go down for one more report from Tim Brandt.
Okay, Jim, I just wanted to keep you updated on the accident that we had a little while earlier. Now, we still don't know the extent of the injuries to these race drivers, but we do know that Kirk Bryant has been examined here at the Track Medical Center and been released. So obviously, he is not in bad shape. Slick Johnson is still in the medical center here at the racetrack. He is being examined even as we speak. He is still in there. So we do know that Kirk Bryant has been released. Slick Johnson is still in there. We will keep you updated. Jimmy?
All right. That is at least partially good news.
I mentioned that a black flag had been waved about 4 laps ago at Richard Petty. They have not shown him that flag again. I don't know what that confusion is about, but for his legions of fans, they've withdrawn that black flag.
For his part, Richard appeared to ignore it. If they're going to let him ride, more power to him.
Exactly.
There's Shepherd's car. He has shown no signs of yielding that lead. In fact, if anything, he's put a little distance between himself and Elliott since the last time we monitored it this closely. They are passing slower vehicles which have been lapped. Among them, Richard Petty, who you see coming to the screen on the left side there.
Tim Richmond, who, of course, has been part of the hunt and part of the story, has dropped suddenly. You see it here on our standings, and he is further back even than it looks. He suddenly fell off the pace for a lap and a half, and seems to have lost whatever edge he had. When that sort of thing happens this stage in the race, and it happens suddenly, usually something in the engine. Could be a valve spring, something like that, depriving him of power.
Now, Shepherd goes by Petty, and for the moment, Bill Elliott had crept back up close to Morgan Shepherd. Now, as he takes a little while to get past Petty, he drops back a little bit. Perhaps we can see here in these next couple of laps what potential Elliott has to close in and place himself on Morgan Shepherd's rear bumper. Less than 20 laps to go now.
The set of tires that I mentioned, they took off Elliott's car so quickly earlier in the game when his car seemed to handle so well. I would predict with certainty is back on the car right now. For one thing, it's showing almost the same kind of handling characteristic that it had then. I just believe he is playing a waiting game. Unless something really exceptional happens, I'm favoring Elliott at this point. Now, Tim Brandt is down there. Tim?
Sam, I'm with Cale Yarborough. Cale, what was the problem?
Well, I really don't know exactly. An oil line, an oil pan or something. The oil pan cracked and the oil line broke or something. The engine was still running, but we had a bad oil leak.
Up to that point, still in the hunt? Relying heavily on the yellows?
Yeah, we just didn't quite hit the combination today. We didn't run. We lost a lap early, the car will seem to be running better, but you can't win them if you're not there at the end.
All right, Cale. Good luck to you. Six-time winner here in Atlanta. Gave us some great pictures today. Jimmy?
Yes, and he's quite a gracious gentleman. Cale Yarborough out of the race in car number 28. Some had thought that he would be in position to make a threat here this weekend, but as Cale himself pointed out, lost a lap early and never really was a part of the action at the front of the pack. Those drivers are. We'll be back to see who wins it. Turn to Atlanta. Jim Lampley with Sam Posey. Lap 316 completed. As you can see, 12 laps to go in the Atlanta 500. As we look at the leaderboard, one further report from the track hospital. Slick Johnson, the other of the two men injured in that crash about 20 laps ago, has been treated for a bruised chest and a minor injury to his left foot and released from the hospital, so he is, to all intents and purposes, okay. Bryant, as Tim Brandt told you earlier, was released just shaken up, so neither man was seriously hurt, and that another testimony to the powerful resilience of these stock cars traveling at over 160 miles an hour here in Atlanta. Meanwhile, the leader remains Morgan Shepherd. Bill Elliott is in second place in car number 9. Classic confrontation between the man who, particularly a year ago, and in any general sense over the course of the past 2 years, has been the most successful racer on the tour. That's Elliott. And Morgan Shepherd, a 44-year-old veteran who's never won a superspeedway event. Brief moments in the sun for Shepherd. He's only won one pole in his career. That was for the fall race here in Atlanta in 1982. So he has demonstrated that he likes this track. All he's got to do now is make that liking hold up for 11 more laps.
Well, Shepherd has got to be really almost in mental agony in that car now, because his position would seem to be so strong, and yet he's got an awful lot of traffic ahead, and now there's an accident on the back straight. Now Morgan Shepherd just passed us here. Car number 90 is involved. That's Kenny Schrader. You see him there. The great sprint car champion. Another spin by Waltrip's brother, Mike. And there's Morgan Shepherd. Now, with so few laps to go, Jim, it is not impossible that the race could finish under the yellow. I noticed Bill Elliott ducking into the pit.
Could this be a bad break for Morgan Shepherd, though? They're going to bunch up again under the yellow, and he's going to lose that working margin that he had over Bill Elliott.
And he was starting to pull ahead, wasn't he? But Elliott's gone into the pit, and will Morgan. You see what I mean? He may not. Now, Elliott has taken an incredible gamble to go in. They're changing his outside tires, and where is Morgan Shepherd? We may see him conceivably go a lap up. A very strange move by Elliott, but Shepherd is going to pit. There he comes.
All right, so Morgan Shepherd is not going to take the gamble. He is going to come into the pits just as Elliott did, and they will stay on the same lap.
All right, and what will they do? Now, they are changing outside rubber. He, of course, must get back out on the track before Elliott to be in the lead when it goes back to green, which it probably will with only a handful of laps to go. It's going to be a real dash to the finish. Earnhardt is also changing his outside rubber. This could breathe new life into a car that gave us a good race earlier in the game. But now this is where Morgan Shepherd's pit crew, I don't know, maybe hurting it. They weren't working that fast. Elliott is stopping again, Jim. Do you make any sense of this?
He must not have liked the tires that he got. He's going to come back and get one more set. And maybe his crew was able to radio to him that he was able to do that because Shepherd was taking an inordinately long time to get out. Now Shepherd's out on the track, and here goes Elliott.
All right, what Elliott's doing now, they didn't dare take time for it the first time. They're now changing the inside rubber on his car, so he'll have completely fresh tires. This is a gamble, obviously, and it is the type of gamble taken by men who will go for the win at any cost. In other words, the safe decision would have been to keep him out there with a car that maybe wouldn't handle quite as well as the car he's got now. Interesting psychology, and you see what kind of people Elliott's team is. Even though they haven't had a success since this race here last year in the fall, they're still gamblers. They haven't become conservative during those races in which they haven't been able to win.
And what an interesting split-second decision by Morgan Shepherd and his crew to come on in. Once again, lay out for us the potential advantage he might have gained by not taking a pit stop.
Right. Obviously, his position on the track will be ahead of Elliott, but Elliott will have the better tires and maybe be able to pass him. But there are just 8 laps to go, as you can see now. Clearly, by the time they've cleaned everything up, and you see Tim Richmond, who did not pit or pitted only once, and we are now believing that he is the leader. Richmond, who had run out of speed there, now back on top let's go down to Tim Brandt now, who is again with Morgan Shepherd's wife after all of this.
Okay, Sam, and I timed this last pit stop by Morgan Shepherd. I came at 35.82. What did you come out with, Sandra?
35-34.
Now, how does that hurt him? Tim Richmond is now the leader. Was the pit stop, did he have to come in?
Well, he didn't have to, but if everybody else come in and got new tires and we didn't, then that's going to slow us down at the end.
How many times have you all talked about winning that first race on the Grand Speedway? You haven't won one.
No, we haven't. This will be our first, and we're really hoping maybe within these last few laps we can get back up there. The guys just haven't had a chance, you know, to really work together, so they're trying their best, and you know, with the help of Jake and everybody, we're doing good. But it's just we got, you know, a little bit of work to catch up on. Everybody else races every week, and we don't. So. Are
there those quiet moments though when you talk about your first win?
Oh yes. Oh yes.
All right, Tim.
All right, thank you very much, Tim Brandt. And we look now at Tim Richmond, who has gone into the pits.
The hood has gone up. I think that they're using this stop under the yellow as a desperate effort to solve whatever problem had beset them that caused Richmond to drop off the pace suddenly. I thought he might have bent a valve. It's possible that one of the spark plug leads came off. That is something they could fix quickly. I don't believe they're even working on it right at the moment. They're getting the tires squared away. A man went back over the wall to get something. Of course, this is desperate for Richmond, but even though Richmond was leading there suddenly, Jim, I don't think he or anybody else realistically valued his chances.
Well, we're now being told that he is the victim of throttle leakage on the car, so he goes back out onto the track not as the leader. Now it is Morgan Shepherd who once again will hold the lead. Behind him, Dale Earnhardt, and that is perhaps the one man he would least have wanted to race with head-to-head in these closing however many laps they will get to race once the green flag comes out. Behind Earnhardt is number 44, Terry Labonte, who is going for his second consecutive win. He won at Rockingham 2 weeks ago. Behind him, car number 11, Darrell Waltrip, and that could pose a problem because Waltrip is going to be between Labonte and Bill Elliott, and Waltrip has been slower. If he is at all difficult for Elliott to get by, that may cost Bill any chance he had of winning the race.
Yeah, I think it'll come down to how many laps remain once they go back to green. Elliott may very well have the fastest car on the track when they go back to green, but he's now got an awful lot of traffic between him and the leader. So what Morgan Shepherd has been doing may pay off for him. I know what his wife meant about the pit crew being a little slow. They knew they weren't working together that well. A similar situation happened to the Firecracker 400 last year with Greg Sachs. He had a crew that was very new, but they managed to win that one. Incidentally, on the Tim Richmond thing, it would be a trouble with the throttle linkage, the throttle not returning properly there.
What did I say? Throttle leakage?
Leakage. But
you'd never find that.
A very small amount. All right.
So there they are. The three cars which will be on the lead when they go green. To the left of your screen, the yellow and white car, Morgan Shepherd, car number 47. Again, in case you just joined us, 44-year-old Morgan Shepherd is an amiable veteran of this circuit who has never won a super speedway race. But this year, with master wrench Jake Elder in charge of his car, he perhaps has a better chance than ever. Behind him, in second place, will be Dale Earnhardt, the man who won the pole here, who appeared in the early going to be far and away the fastest car on the track, and who is just 3 weeks past having been penalized, fined in fact, by the governing body, NASCAR, for having been deemed to be the culprit in a late lap crash with Darrell Waltrip, which may have cost him a chance to win a race at Richmond. Terry Labonte is behind Earnhardt in car number 44, and he was the winner at Rockingham 2 weeks ago. We are now told that there will be 4 laps to go as they take the green flag in one more lap. So there are 5 laps to go now. They will take the green after this time around, and there will be 4 laps in which to race. So it'll in effect be a 4-lap race between Shepherd number 47, Earnhardt number 3, Labonte number 44. And then behind Labonte, I believe the 4th place car is Darrell Waltrip, car number 11. There indeed is Waltrip right there on your screen. And behind him, the 5th place car, car number 9, Bill Elliott, who seemed to have things all set up for a potential late run at Morgan Shepherd prior to that last yellow flag.
It would seem that with only 4 laps of racing left, the odds are really stacked against Bill Elliott. It'll be interesting, however, to see Earnhardt, who couldn't come up with the speed prior to this last yellow, to see what they may have done to his car during the thing. You know, if you're trying to pick which car you'd like to be in right now, it's really a tough call, because with so many changes made to the cars during that last series of stops, I really don't know. I know I'd rather have Bill Elliott's chassis underneath me than anything else, but needless to say, I'd like to have Morgan Shepherd's starting position. But would
you rather have Shepherd's place than Dale Earnhardt's place? Conventional wisdom has been, in the past, given the slingshot technique and the aerodynamics of the sport, that you're better off being second than first.
Yeah, but that doesn't work that way so much anymore. No, I think it's better if you can lead, and Shepherd seems to, every time it goes green, he seems to get a little jump on the guys. I just psychologically, here's Morgan Shepherd, who's never won one, and here's Dale Earnhardt, who's just like a smoking pistol of a man. You know, in a sense, it's the good guy versus not really the bad guy, but kind of a villain of some things. And you know, look at Earnhardt now. We're seeing it happen maybe even sooner than we thought it would. He seems to have a real good grip. The same grip that
3 laps to go.
Gave Earnhardt the pole position. Labonte in 3rd. Labonte
in 3rd, don't count him out. He is a remarkably cool customer. Remember, Labonte got his very first win on this circuit back in 1980 when a 3-car crash on the last lap of the Southern 500 put him ahead into 1st place. That's Morgan Shepherd's wife, Sandra Shepherd. We've spoken to her several times, and she's now watching. When they come back around this time, there will be 2 laps to go. Earnhardt is all dialed in, it looks like to me, Sam, right there on Morgan Shepherd's rear bumper.
Yeah, but he's got to get by, and there's no reason at all for him to hold back, Jim. If he could get by, I think he'd be by. I got to feel this is going to be a real race to the end. It's not a clear-cut thing, although the 2 leaders are keeping that small margin ahead of the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th place, the 3rd, 4th, and 5th place cars who don't seem to have a shot at it at this stage. Although, look, they're right there. Labonte in 3rd, Waltrip in 4th, and still Bill Elliott unable to get out of 5th.
All right, there's going to be 1 lap to go as of right now. So we are on the last lap. Morgan Shepherd with the lead. Dale Earnhardt right in position. It is the classic confrontation of stock car racing. The only question, when will Earnhardt make his move, and can he get by?
I don't believe he can slipstream by. I don't think he can draft by. I think he has to get him in the turn. They are going into the last turn. This is Earnhardt's last chance. As you can see, he can attack, but can he get by?
Checkered flag is out and ready. Morgan Shepherd's never seen one before in a super speedway race. Here is the checkered flag, and there is Morgan Shepherd's first super speedway victory. And there is the celebration in Morgan Shepherd's pit. And this was a quite unexpected accomplishment. 44-year-old Morgan Shepherd of Conover, North Carolina. Former champion in a class called sportsman racing. That's a long way from winning a super speedway NASCAR event as he has just done today.
You saw Dale Earnhardt pull alongside him, obviously to congratulate him, to give him a congratulatory wave. That is a bitter defeat for several very highly touted drivers that have just finished right behind Morgan Shepherd.
And it's a big win for General Motors cars, which have frequently eaten Ford exhaust here at Atlanta in the past.
First Ford is back there in 5th, the Bill Elliott car. He never could spring himself loose from there.
Shepherd in a Buick, Earnhardt in a GM car, Labonte in a GM car, Waltrip held 4th place in a GM car, and Bill Elliott, as you saw, finished 5th.
This is exciting because you realize the way the prize money is structured, this could very well be the beginning of a real leap forward for Morgan Shepherd in terms of his career. It is wonderful to see it. Jake Elder, his crew chief, with more than 22 years of experience in this sport. That can pay off.
10th different driver to win in the last 10 races. And if you want to draw an analogy in terms of what it does for a driver, this is a little bit like a golfer winning for the first time. No more qualifying on Mondays, so to speak. Let's go down to Tim Brandt, who is right there next to Morgan Shepherd's car.
All right, I'm in Morgan's car. And Morgan, first of all, congratulations. You've won the National. Now you come out, you've got the Super Speedway.
Well, I tell you, it's been a long time coming. I tell you, I just can't hardly talk. I'd like to thank God. Thank Jack Beebe for giving me the opportunity. And Jake Elder for being such a good chassis man.
Morgan, if you can take your helmet off, I want to ask you, first of all, how many times, and of course you're working with a crew which is relatively new. You came in for a critical pit stop down the wire there. You changed all 4 tires, everything else. They stuck with you.
Okay.
Morgan, your feelings right now as you sit in this car with your first Speedway win.
I tell you, this is just great. You know, I couldn't believe it's going to happen. We worked all day there. The car, either it was too loose or either it pushed. And Jake and I talked on the radio about what to do. And we finally got our tire staggered and got everything right, and the car was hooked up at the end. You know, you just can't beat these Buicks.
All the years that you've been on these tracks, did you ever think this day would come?
Well, I knew it wouldn't if somebody didn't give me a chance. And I'd like to thank Jack Beebe for that.
Of course, Jack's been with you all the way through. And what about a sponsor now? What does this do as far as you're concerned there?
Well, this team needs a sponsor. You know, we're on a limited schedule, and maybe if we get a sponsor, then we could run them all.
When did you know you had this race? And what was the key element in your mind?
Hey, I didn't know I had it until I seen a checkered flag.
With Earnhardt sitting on your rearview mirror, what was going through your mind?
Well, I knew Earnhardt was tough, but our car was working well, and I knew I could hold the bottom, and I knew it was going to be a knockdown drag-out. But fortunately, Ducky Newman them does the engine, and we had a good engine, you know, good Buick. What can I say?
Morgan, one of the things that I think is a key is the yellow flag goes up. You don't even come in, which was a whale of a gamble. Why was that?
Well, we had changed left side tires that time, and the car was working well, and so I told them, let's just stay like we was.
Congratulations to you and Sanja, and good luck in the future.
Thank you.
Okay, Jim Lampley and Sam Posey, back up to you.
Morgan Shepherd was a rookie in stock car racing 1982, had a short track win that year, won a pole position here in Atlanta that year, and other than that, hasn't much scratched. 4th place at Rockingham 2 weeks ago. If you were a real prophet, perhaps even a genius, you might have looked at that and said, hey, Morgan Shepherd, if this car gets a little bit better, has got a shot in Atlanta. But I doubt that there are too many people, even in the inner structure of the sport, who had quite that much wisdom looking into this particular week on the schedule. Our congratulations to Morgan Shepherd, who was clearly quite overcome with emotion and deserves all the credit he gets for this. Now let's go to Al Troutwig.
Well, Jim, of course, we remember that Bill Elliott came in, had 2 new tires during the yellow, went back out, and then came right back in. I'm with Dan Elliott, one of the other Elliott brothers, and it seems as though one of these, perhaps, is the reason why Bill Elliott didn't win today. Dan, what happened?
We just had a problem getting the lug nut off, and when finally did get it off, we didn't have time to get on the 2 left side tires, so we had to go back out, come back in again.
For that few laps, was it necessary to put the tires on the other side?
It was for the competition that we had here today. Had it not been for all the cars that were in the lead lap and running so good, we would have probably stayed out, but we couldn't gamble today.
Dan, moments ago, Morgan Shepherd was enjoying the victory so much he broke down into tears. Was that the kind of feeling that it is to win, and is it equally the opposite feeling when you lose in such a close race like this?
Yes, it is, and the only way you can ever feel it is to be in victory circle and know how it feels, and then anything besides winning is a loss.
We spoke to your brother Bill the other day. He said, you know, you're always going to have good seasons and you're going to have bad seasons. And while this season has a lot of racing to go, it has been a little bit of a rough start for the Elliott crew. How's the morale? How's everybody holding up, do you think?
Well, it's like the song says, when the going gets tough, the tough get going.
I've heard that before. Okay, Jim, back to you. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
All right. So you have seen a taste of victory and a taste of defeat, and we'll have more from here in Atlanta. Morgan Shepherd, the winner. Atlanta, where the Shepherd family, Morgan and his wife Sanja, have just scored their first super speedway victory on the NASCAR stock car racing circuit. Throughout the latter stages of the race, you saw the crescendo of emotions building up for Sanja Shepard, and right now Tim Brandt is with her again.
Jake Beebe just walked in here, and I'm telling you, it is an ecstatic group. Morgan is still with us. Sanja, of course, Morgan, she carried us through the race. She kept us updated on the laps and everything else. You're feeling after all of that?
I feel absolutely fantastic. And I couldn't say enough about Jake and all the crew and Jack, everybody. It's just been wonderful. NASCAR's been great. Everybody's just been wonderful. Atlanta, Speedway, everybody.
Sanja, even with 60-some laps to go, you were so extremely confident, which seems so uncharacteristic for a family that hasn't won here on the Speedway, and yet you were so confident. Why?
I just felt that he had the right combination. He felt good last night about it, and the way he was running on the racetrack, I just felt like that everything was going to be fine. He wasn't holding back none. He was going all out.
Congratulations to both of us. You gave us one whale of a thrill today. Back up to you guys.
All right, a pleasure to look at those happy faces in the winner's circle, and sometimes not to be able to look at the faces. And we'll be back with more exclusive coverage of the Atlanta 500 after this word from our local stations. There are the final standings unofficially in the Atlanta 500. There will still be further audit of the lap counts to be sure, but for the moment it appears that behind Shepard you had Dale Earnhardt finishing second, and in third place to Terry Labonte, and fourth place to Darrell Waltrip, and so on down as you see there. Fifth place Elliott, sixth place Parsons, seventh place Richmond, eighth place I believe went to Richard Petty, and then Wallace, Bodine, Allison Gant, Tommy Ellis, and Buddy Baker. The drama here, of course, centered on the first super speedway victory ever for veteran race car driver Morgan Shepard. And here is a look at precisely the emotional gamut run by his wife, Sanja Shepard, during the last lap of the race. You'll recall that during this period of time, Morgan Shepard was just ahead of Dale Earnhardt. Earnhardt appeared to be positioned on the rear bumper of Shepard for a possible move. She said one to go, and seemed at this moment more or less calm. There's nothing much that she can do in that position, Sam.
No, but she can see that last turn as he comes off, and I think at that point it was decisive. There's no slipstreaming, no drafting that works anymore, and I think she knew right there it was happening. There it is. He was going right in front of her at that point.
Hey, but look at how dedicated she is. She's going to write something down on the lap chart? No, that's okay. Once we've won the race, we can put the lap chart down, and there the celebration begins. Jake Elder, the man who is the crew chief for Morgan Shepard's car, was once the crew chief for the Holman Moody Ford team, which won 28 races in 2 years at one point. Terrific job today. Have all the unofficial final results here in Atlanta. We spoke of the work of the master wrench, Jake Elder, who helped bring Morgan Shepard home today. And now Jake is standing by with Tim Brandt.
Jake, first of all, you were mentioning some problems along the way with Morgan, and yet you were so bold all afternoon. What were the problems? Why were you concerned?
Well, we first started the race, and we made a little amount of chassis change this morning, and we got a little loose. Then we decided we'd go with this 370 gear today, and they was beating us as bad up off a 2 over there. And Morgan said, well, I think we need to change the chassis a little bit, put me some wedge in, and open up the stagger in the rear, you know what I mean? That stagger on the tires, and so we did that, so we got to picking up a little bit. So he wanted to keep his momentum up, and he wanted to run high because we was pulling a little bit higher gear than the rest of them was. That way he keep his RPMs up, you know. When he had to run low, they could just beat his bed up off 2 down there.
Tell me about your crew. I know you haven't been together long. They did a tremendous job today.
Well, all of my pit crew is new except Jim Merritt, and he's been with the Race Hill Farm for about 4 or 5 years. But the rest of my crew is brand new.
Well, they did a tremendous job today. Congratulations to you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so as Morgan and his wife and everybody else enjoy the first victory here at Atlanta, we'll be back right after this.
One more time, a look at the unofficial final results in the Atlanta 500. Morgan Shepard's first super speedway victory in stock car racing. Dale Earnhardt, a very close second. Terry Labonte third. Darrell Waltrip, Bill Elliott, Benny Parsons, Tim Richmond, best finish of the season for Richmond. Rusty Wallace, we are now told, is in 8th place. Bobby Allison, Jeff Bodine moved Richard Petty down to 11th. Harry Gant, 12th. Tommy Ellis, who started 42nd and last on the grid, finished the race and wound up in 13th place. And Alan Kulwicki was 14th. Stick with us. We will have further wrap-up activity from here at the Atlanta 500, including a full replay of the dramatic closing laps of the race. Coverage of the Atlanta 500 was produced by Chuck Howard, directed by Larry Camp. Technical Director Werner Gunther, Associate Producer Ben Harvey, Associate Directors Dick Buffington and Jack Grant. Racing in 1986, 4 different makes of cars have won those races. 4 different drivers have won those races. And right now, Sam Posey, as we'll talk about in just a little bit, you have an extremely balanced competition in Grand National stock car racing, the super speedway kind of racing we saw here today. For the moment, it appears almost anybody who's suited up in a General Motors car can win a race. And for more on that, let's go down to Al Troutwig.
Well, Jim, really the story for Dale Earnhardt today, I believe, was the fuel. And with me is David Smith, who helps sets up the car, and he keeps track of the fuel consumption for Dale Earnhardt's car. Now, David, there was a critical moment early in the race when it looked as though Dale ran out of fuel. I couldn't confirm it at the time, but did he?
Yeah, we did run out again. We've had a problem with the fuel mileage this year. A little bit down on it, really. We're getting more horsepower, and you get more horses, you got to feed them. So we were scheduled to come in about 2 laps earlier, which was on race lap number 58. No one else had pitted, and the way our projections ran, we should have been able to go 60 laps with no problem. The thing made it 59 3/4, so we were close, but not close enough. But, you know, luckily we got a caution later and got, you know, didn't lose the lap, and we were able to get back in contention, so we were okay.
Does that spook the crew for the rest of the race?
Oh, it tears my nerves out for a little while, because everyone back home, you know, knows that I help with the fuel miles, and Richard, and I correspond to Richard and Kirk Shelby, of course. They determine when Dale comes in, so I just keep the chart. And I feel embarrassed. You know, everybody feels a little bit embarrassed, but we're working on the whole deal, so we know what we need to do. It's just a matter of getting to it.
Okay, David. And by the way, Jim, these guys felt that Dale had enough power to pass by Morgan Shepherd in the last lap, but he couldn't do it. Back to you.
Well, if he had enough power, he was not able to demonstrate it. Now, I said moments ago, almost anyone who's outfitted in a General Motors car can win a race. Of course, Kyle Petty, in winning up at Richmond, did win in a Ford, but it's worth noting that he was 5th in that race and was really presented with the opportunity for victory in the closing laps as a result of the crash that took out Earnhardt and Waltrip. Your final reflections on what Morgan Shepherd was able to accomplish here today?
To me, it's so exciting when somebody who is, in a sense, a privateer, who's pushed and hoped for so long that success could finally come his way, can break through the Megabucks team's strength. And I mean, finishing behind him from Earnhardt, back to Waltrip, back to Elliott, were a whole group of people that any hunter would consider fine trophies indeed. And I think for somebody to go out there with much less ammunition, so to speak, and still be able to knock off the big guys, shows how incredibly well-balanced NASCAR racing is right now, because even though over the whole series, yes, the big guys will emerge victorious, on any given day, the little guy can still come through if he's got heart enough and luck enough.
Remarkable how rapidly things have changed in the sport. A year ago, there was concern on the part of drivers, officials, sponsors in the sport that Bill Elliott was dominating the competition so clearly and consistently that they were going to lose some spectator appeal as a result of that. Now, a year later, you could not find a more markedly different situation.
I know it, and it's extremely welcome, although I think that in some ways last year lent a little focus to the sport, too. It did show that a team could get a handle on it, a little bit like rooting for a great golfer in professional golf can give the sport some identity for a period of time.
Because Elliott established the standard which the GM cars have reacted to with their present performance. Now, exactly. You will recall that the last 4 laps of this race, a drama established by a caution flag, which came on about lap 100, or at about the 492-mile mark, I should say, and left 6 miles of racing in effect. 4 laps, which began right here. And Sam Posey, we're going to take another look back now at the upset which took place as a result of this scenario. Now, Shepherd was leading in car number 47, and Dale Earnhardt had been shuffled to 2nd place when the deck was shuffled during that caution flag, which just preceded this.
And while Shepherd was able to pull quickly ahead of Earnhardt, Earnhardt's counterattack was so effective that I'm absolutely certain that had Earnhardt been ahead of Shepherd at the restart, Earnhardt would have just pulled away during these last 4 laps. But being right with Shepard and getting by him were obviously two very different things. It's interesting that Terry Labonte in the blue car really shadowed them the whole way. Now, here's a man that never led the race, or maybe only a couple of laps during yellows, and yet when it came right down to it, Labonte, who you see in that blue car in third now, really had the speed of the leaders as well. It was an incredibly well-matched race for the finish. It's just that Morgan Shepard had the tactical position that he needed. Earnhardt must have just been going through the agonies of the damned at this point, because I think he realized that Shepard could carry that speed off of the turns, and even though he could attack down low, and you see him pushing him here, that when it came time right here to accelerate off, Shepard's car ran so smoothly off the turn that Earnhardt couldn't do anything about it. You saw Earnhardt's car wiggle a little bit, meaning his car was sliding, and he just couldn't put the throttle down as soon as he wanted to.
Precisely what I was going to ask you. As you look at the rear end of Earnhardt's car in this replay, doesn't it appear that maybe he was a little too loose?
Yes, it does look that way, although I don't know what he could have done that would have been any different. I think that Shepard at this point wound up with a nearly perfect handling car, and of course there was no traffic ahead. The tail enders were well around the track, so it was a clean race to the finish.
Just to reiterate, the new aerodynamics of the sport have eliminated a lot of the previous benefit of slingshotting off this last turn. 5 or 6 years ago, you might have said that Earnhardt had the advantage here. Today, you specifically stated no.
Yeah, because the air flows so much more cleanly over those cars that Earnhardt is not enjoying much advantage in the draft, or you would have seen him catching up. That's Jake Elder, by the way, with the glasses, the master crew chief, who was the architect of this victory today in terms of the strategy. That is, by the way, the official time, 3:46 for the race. That's a very slow running of the Atlanta 500. Indeed, the
final average speed unofficially is right at 132 miles per hour and change, 132.126, compared to a year ago, Bill Elliott's victory in this race at something over 140 miles per hour. So many drivers leave here for a 3-week break, it should be pointed out, in the stock car racing circuit, with fresh questions to ask themselves about their cars and their potential performance looking ahead to the rest of the season. And of course, there were many questions surrounding Bill Elliott coming into this race. You can see there that Elliott wound up in 5th place. I think, if anything, Elliott probably answered the doubters today. He just didn't come away with a victory.
I think that analyzes it perfectly. I mean, it really was a matter of that jammed lug nut, it looks like. I think he was in the best position to win, except for that small little thing. But, of course, that's what makes the difference in racing, doesn't it?
And this kind of racing is a matter of only the slightest adjustments, as all of the races seem to be so close and so competitive at the end. We are looking at further finishes on down the line. Right now, let's take a look at a word about an upcoming program on ABC Sports.
Saturday, it's the professional owners.
As we look forward to the Kentucky Derby, and of course, later on in the month of May, qualifying and the race at Indianapolis. There again, final unofficial results from today's live coverage of the Atlanta 500 stock car race. The 3rd place finisher is one of the hottest young forces in the sport. Number 44 car, Terry Labonte, winner in Rockingham 2 weeks ago, 3rd place today, standing by with with Tim Brandt right now. Tim?
Jim, Terry and I were just talking, and it seems like you were in a fight all day. You were fighting around the track, and your car was tight and working on that. Tell us about that.
Well, the car ran good all day long. We kept trying to get a little bit better, and we never quite got there. We kept playing with the tire stagger and taking some wedge out and stuff like that, but it was a good run for us. We've got to be pleased with 3rd.
It seemed like, coming around, that you had a lot of car left under you at the end of the race, though, and you were still driving pretty hard.
Well, I thought we had a good shot at it there at the end on that last caution, because that bunched us all back up. And but still, we adjusted the car a little bit, but still it was just a little too tight at the end, and we couldn't catch them.
Terry, you still have to be tremendously enthused. You win last week, or the last race, and you come in here and you have a tremendous showing here as well. So it seems like everything is in place and everything is working.
Well, we're real pleased. I'm really tickled with all the guys in the crew. The Piedmont Airlines, Anderson Webb, Oldsmobile just run super all year long. And, we really couldn't be happier.
Was it a big adjustment for you with the changes in the GMs and how they really got that push situation to them?
Well, it was kind of a big change for us because we went from a Chevrolet to an Oldsmobile, and it's a completely new car for us, and we've learned a lot about it, and we've still got a lot to learn about it.
You said today they were tinkering all the way through, trying to make those adjustments. Never did quite find the right one, but how close are you?
I think we're pretty close.
All right. Good luck to you, Jerry.
Thank you.
Okay, back up to you, Jim.
Terry Labonte, once from Corpus Christi, Texas. I think Terry's now moved to North Carolina, the heartland of stock car racing. Here are more scores from the NCAA basketball tournament, in case you have not been with us all day. Alabama shaded Illinois. Navy, in the upset of the day, defeated Syracuse at Syracuse in the Carrier Dome. Brilliant performance for the Navy center, David Robinson. The statistics you see reflected there. North Carolina State had to go to double overtime to eliminate Arkansas Little Rock. So Arkansas Little Rock had a few more moments of drama after their victory over Notre Dame, but finally fell today to the Wolfpack. Kentucky beat Western Kentucky, the two teams meeting for the first time in 15 years. Another brilliant performance from Kenny Walker of Roberta, Georgia. Meanwhile, Cleveland State goes on. Their second victory in the tournament comes at the expense of St. Joseph's. In the second half now, the St. John's Redmen, trying to move on in the West, are leading Auburn 69-57. Here in Atlanta, the Atlanta 500 has shared headlines, of course, with Georgia Tech's bid for supremacy in the NCAA basketball tournament. But today, the Peach State was the scene of stock car racing. And now for a final word from his end of the pits, here's Al Troutwig.
Well, Jim, you know, whether your car is wrecked like Kirk Bryant's or whether it's clean, you put it in the tractor trailer and you head to the next stop. We've seen what a great day it was for Morgan Shepherd. I just thought we'd check in and see what kind of a day it was for Tommy Ellis, who started in last place. Tommy, you were pushed back because NASCAR felt you violated the rules. You promised me that you would make up a lot of ground at the start. You did. You passed 14 cars within 10 or 15 laps. Then what happened?
Well, the car was a little loose, and we was in the back of the pack, and the leaders had such a big jump on us, we ended up getting lapped to run about 60, 70 laps, something like that, without a caution. I don't know exactly how many it was, maybe 75 miles anyway. Without a caution, we ended up getting a lap down, and we were running pretty good from then on, and then right at the end we had a flat run the whole day. We had a good top 10 finish going, and after we had that flat, it was just we lost another lap before we could get into the pits and get it changed. And you know, it's just awful hard when you go out and run hard and work as hard as all these guys do on the car. And Freelander, the mortgage people, they give us the equipment we need to run good with, and it just looks like with the bad luck we've been having, we haven't been able to give them what they deserve.
All right, Tommy, thanks very much. So there you have it. From last place to first place, Morgan Shepherd. And to you, Jim Lampley and Sam Posey.
All right, thanks very much, Al. Let me correct the basketball score. Put Auburn on top of St. John's and not vice versa. If you are a Southerner, as I am, you have to have enjoyed not only the race, but the colorful palette of speech patterns which we have been feasting on all day here in Atlanta. Now, for Sam Posey, Tim Brandt, and Al Troutwig, I'm Jim Lampley. Goodbye.